We have a pretty decent agenda for tonight. The big item on the agenda right now is the school department budget, and we thank Dr. Price, Mr. Mealy, and Mr. Gilligan for being here, since you're going to own the budget. I like it. You get set up, then you got to process them. I'm sure you're actively involved in the whole thing. Following that, we'll have some more follow-up questions for Andrew Maylor relative to the capital improvement plan. And then we are going to discuss a little bit about the special town meeting, in particular, what role or roles we don't have, roles we do and roles we don't have relative to the town meeting. With that, I ask Jim Mealy to kick it off.
Okay, I think Jennifer, you're the one that's casting now.
Yeah, but let me make sure that I'm casting what.
Well, I can, if you let me cast, I have more than just that presentation.
You got it. Go.
So, just as a little start, we threw some questions quickly at you guys. Had I vetted it a little more, it might have been a little different, since I'm the one that collects these things. Like, it doesn't come from everybody. So, more than anything else, is really to grease the skids relative to, or get the juices flowing relative to the committee members as well as yourselves, the things that we might be interested in. But I wouldn't take them verbatim in context relative to what they're said in here.
May I just add a point here? None of these questions are mine.
Okay.
So Tim, we have the questions that you sent, but what I thought I would do very quickly, I did it in 3 minutes and 40 seconds on NACAM, is just give an overview of the budget proposal, if that's okay. And then just allow you to ask whatever questions. We're set up with the questions that you asked us, but we'll just respond to your questions. We do have some additional materials.
Perfect.
Okay?
Thank you.
Does that
Sounds
reasonable?
like a plan. Yep.
So just very quickly with the budget that Jim's going to talk about, two things drive our budget. One is the strategic plan. I hope that's not new to you. It's something we've been talking a lot about. And then the other is the school committee directives. And the school committee directives, two areas that we really are focused on this year is elementary class size. It's something we've been talking about for a few years now, and really trying to get as many classes as possible. That's the objective. Yeah, getting many classes as possible in the 18 to 22 range for K to 2 and the 23 to 25 range for 3 to 5. Our goal for this upcoming year was to get the number of classes above that below 15%. And just for reference, you'll see in the documents, just a few years ago, 53% of the classes in the North Andover public schools were above those guidelines. So we are making steady progress on that goal. We'll talk more about that. And then the other major directive was to make sure that the ECC opens in the way that it should, as a full school. So as we move forward, you can see that the vast majority of the recommendations are around the ECC. So just the big numbers are level services at 2.81%, and we can talk about that number if you have questions. We've done some thoughtful work around maintaining the cost of level services at a reasonable rate there. And then our proposed increases, all to support the ECC, are about $400,000 for a total increase of 3.65%. And a comment, as we've talked a lot about, is within the recommendations of the town manager at 3.65%. So if approved, this would be the 6th year in a row we've had a consensus budget, which is, I think, great for the town of North Andover. I tweeted that out. I will tell you that one of the tweets I got back was, "Why can't Andover do this?" But just thought I'd tell you. So, I just quoting a tweet. So if you look at this, and I don't need to get into all the specifics, I'm happy to answer any of the specifics, but really the reality of the situation is we want to open a school. And when you open a school, you need some supports. It's not just the teachers and the kids in the classroom. You need a school nurse. So currently one school nurse is not going to be enough. We need 1.5 because of the needs of our students of the ECC. However, that being said, one of the things we want to remind folks is even though these funds are being spent at the ECC, I'll take the counselor psychologist position. We need a counselor. We are not pulling a counselor from the 5 other elementary schools. What that means is that all of the counselor loads at all of our elementary schools are being reduced. So we are actually having a significant impact on our elementary schools. So that means the counselor at Sargent is losing 100 students. So their counselor load goes down by 100. So, you could say, well, Jen, it's the same number of kids, pull a counselor from each school one day a week, and that'll be the counselor support at the ECC. That's not what we're proposing. So as we're doing this, we're not only supporting the ECC, we're actually supporting in each of these categories the elementary schools, the 1 through 5 schools. Same with speech and language, same with reading. We're not going to be pulling a reading teacher. Same with special education. Special education caseloads will go down from an average of 31 to 28 at the elementary level because of this. EL support. Specialists is slightly different because specialists have a number of blocks. I think it's 31, Mr. Gilligan.
31 per week.
That they can teach per week. We actually don't need to increase specialists much because we have the same number of classrooms, but we do need to increase specialists for the sole purpose of people have to travel. And so we need the logistics of them going back and forth is about a 0.3. We need a custodian to open the school. Currently, there's no full-time custodian. We're going to have a cafeteria. That's not manageable. Secretary, there's only a secretary 2 days a week. We need a full-time secretary with a school of over 400 kids. Some special education administration and a principal. I do talk that we are going to open the ECC with a co-principal. Judy Rogers, who's currently the K coordinator, is going to come and work with Mary Lou Connors, and so that both groups, the preschool and the K, feel supported by folks they've worked with. They have been working incredibly well together to support the transition. So that is basically the budget proposal in a nutshell, simply stated to open the K. So a few things that I also wanted to touch base on is special education, always something we are thoughtful about. As you will see, and I'm happy to get into the numbers, we have had significant success in reducing our out-of-district costs this year, which is a big change for the North Andover Public Schools. Our costs this year are down about $400,000. And one of the things that I want to just talk about with that is circuit breaker came back at 65% this year. It is supposed to be at 75%. We budget 72%. Came back at 65%, which meant we had a $130,000 gap. In previous years, we've come to the Special Education Stabilization Fund. If that's happened, you'll notice we are not, as of this moment, Jim always tells me, be careful, you could have somebody move in. But at this moment, we are not anticipating coming for any stabilization money because we are able to cover the gap. The other thing that I think is really important is that when we save an out of district, we're actually using a lot of those savings and investing them back in district. So there are two ways we do that. One is a student comes back, let's just take student A, comes back from an out of district placement. Often that student will come back with support. So they'll come back with a teaching assistant or a behavior therapist. That part of them coming back is they have a full-time one-on-one. That is much more cost efficient for us to actually hire someone. We're not paying with transportation. We're not paying the costs of tuition. So often a student will actually, although it feels like we are saving that money, we are actually not saving the full amount because that student requires additional supports. And then the other thing that is if we have any savings is it's my strong belief that one of the things that we need to do within North Andover to continue to reduce out-of-district costs is build strong programs. And so we're taking the savings that we are finding through out-of-district and building strong programs. Two very concrete examples from this year. We had a group of kids at the high school that we felt that we were not meeting their needs. Students who any of our programs, frankly, they were in one of our programs, their academic success was higher than a number of the other kids in the program, and so we needed to separate. Because we had out-of-district savings, we were actually able to hire an additional special educator mid-year and create a small program for this group of kids. Similarly, we have had a lot of success having behavior technicians and behavior specialists, and we were able to just 2 weeks ago hire an additional behavior specialist who's actually working in our schools, so that rather than kids would have significant behaviors, we're getting support in the classroom, and we'll be able to put in plans, which is then keeping kids within our regular education, within our general education programs. So it's exciting. So my recommendation for special education is to fund it at a level amount, not increase special education amounts, but anything that we save, if this trend continues, to continue to invest back in strong special education programs.
Quick question. What is the overall driver of this positive change over the last year or two?
The overall what?
Driver, what's caused this? that you being-
Well, I think a few things. I think one of the, we hired an assistant superintendent for student services. I think bringing in a high caliber assistant superintendent, if you remember a few years ago, we went from a director of special education to an assistant superintendent for student services, and I think that has had a significant impact on really looking at these programs with, and she has extensive experience with maintaining kids in district and has success doing that. It's one of the reasons we hired her. So I think we have to talk about Dr. Donna Straight making a significant difference here. I also think we've done a lot of thoughtful work in the last few budgets to build strong programs, especially around social emotional learning. So if you may, for those of you who are new, but over 50% of our students are out of district are there for primary diagnosis of social emotional learning, and we did not have strong SEL programs. We have hired a director of social emotional learning, and we have created a pre-K to 12 continuum of SEL programs, and that has had a significant change in terms of keeping kids in district.
Okay, thank you.
And bringing kids back. I mean, most families, if there's a program that's going to meet the needs of their kids, would rather have their kid go to their local school. And so by building these programs, we've been able to bring back a number of students. So I think it's mindset, and also we've gotten some really good people in place to build these programs.
Very good, thank you.
Curriculum fund, through some very creative work of Mr. Maylor, we were able to use a Medicaid reimbursement fund that, and we were able to use that money. We got, if you remember last year, we got permission to be able to use that money for curriculum. We actually have what we've spent. We'll happily show that to you in a bit. But one of the things I am going to ask is that cap increase. That doesn't mean we can spend any more money. It's just that as of right now, we are anticipating the reimbursement will be above $250,000, and we would like to access those funds for curriculum resources. So this is not, and a lot of the reason that number has gone up, this is, simple economics, is once that fund became very tangible to us, we worked very hard to get parents to reimburse us. So a few years ago, I think 12% of our families gave us permission for reimbursement. I think we're about at 97, 98% now. Yeah. So again, the hit to the general fund of the town had anticipated that to be about $160,000. That was what they were carrying each year when we did revenue fixed costs, and we are hoping that number is going to be around $350,000, $400,000. So it's kind of one of those. The loss of 160 to the town general fund really resulted in a significant deal here. And as you'll see, if it wasn't for these funds, we just rolled out, if any of you guys have kids in the schools, you know that we just rolled out a new math program K through 6, and we could never have done it without this. You're talking about a significant expenditure that just we could not have done without having to cut something else. Yep. And then ECC librarian, we are going to, one of the things that I'm very excited about and proud of is our relationship with the Stevens Memorial Library. It's been, I think, really great for both the library and for the schools. And so we do need a librarian at the ECC. You'll notice that's not in the increased. We're going to reallocate some of our technology funding. Our technology, we've had a tenfold increase over the last 4 years in student devices, tenfold. We've really made incredible progress in technology. We also have all of our classrooms 1 through 12, and it will be K through 12 next year, that are model classrooms, which have an overhead projector, a document camera. So we feel that we can reallocate a small portion of our technology budget to the ECC for a librarian. We may have another embedded librarian. Currently, we have one with between Atkinson and the Stevens. We may do the same at the K, or we may combine that and just have one librarian between Atkinson and the ECC. That's a conversation Kathleen Keenan and I are continuing to have. All right, and then the last part, I think, EL. This is another thing you guys asked about. English learners. So this used to be ELL. The terminology changes all the time. So just trying to. So, English learners, we have seen an increase in numbers, and again, we'll show you that in a moment. We had 61 students a number of years ago. I think we're now up to 98. So we've seen an increase. We went from a percentage of 1.2 up to 1.3 to 2% of our students. So we've had an increase of students, EL students. One of the things that we have known is that we are supporting most of our EL students through tutors. And so we are hiring people as tutors. We're not hiring them as teachers. And we have not increased the rate that we have been paying those tutors because they are not in the union. They're not part of a bargaining union. We have not increased them for 10 years. And that's problematic. So we are recommending for next year to increase them from $28.79 to $32. We plan to cover those increased costs through our student exchange program, through the Cambridge Institute, which we can do. You will notice when I talk about looking ahead, I talk about a much more an overhaul of the EL program to ensure that we have teachers that we're paying on the teacher's salary, but that will take a number of years. So, and then I last year put into my budget, and I hope it is helpful, and please know that soon-to-be Dr. Gilligan knows what I'm writing here. Obviously, this is not just me. But one of the things I think that's helpful is we have made progress as a school system, in my opinion, because we have put forward a plan and we have made progress, sustained progress on those goals over a number of years. And as I did last year, I think it's always really important to say what lies ahead. You know, we did not do everything in this budget. We are excited about opening the ECC, but there's some things we were unable to do. And some of them are daunting, and some of them are we just need to continue to keep going. So elementary class size, one of the things we did not do in this budget is backfill the vacated elementary classes. We've done some analysis, which will show you 6 teachers is what we would need to get the number to 0. And so we have 6 more teachers to go. I think that's incredibly doable within the next 2 budget cycles, and I think I'm being conservative in that. So I do think you'll get there over time and be able to actually have every classroom within, you know, obviously almost every, sometimes a few extra kids move in August and you're in trouble, right? But we have almost every classroom within the school committee guidelines, which would be a significant change for North Andover, from 53% in the 2012 school year to 0 in the short period of time. That is an example of we created a target. We work collaboratively with the town. Mr. Maylor can talk about class size averages almost as well, if not better than I can. We all knew where we were headed, and we have made a significant progress on that. So here is the work. Here's the changes. This is percentage of classes over the class size averages. You'll see we're at 53% in 2012 through 2014. I know that's 2 years. This year we're at 29%. Our projection next year is that we're going to be around the 15%. And is the next one there, and we'll get to the, it's the last. Okay, I'll come back to that in a minute.
Is that due to student population or mixture
No.
of both?
We have added 5 elementary classrooms over that period of time,
Okay.
and we have 6 more to go.
Okay.
So we're about halfway there, 53, 29. We're getting there. And then the other great thing I will tell you is by bringing all the Ks together, we are able to equalize class size across the district. So for instance, we have some Ks that are above the class size average this year, but if for this current year, if I took every K student and put them in one building, all the Ks would be below, right? Because when you have, right, so there is advantages of having one grade all in one place because you can just even them out. They all will be within one student of one another.
Yep.
Now, the next juggernaut, in my opinion, is our first goal was to elementary class size. The next challenge for North Andover Public Schools is middle school class sizes. And as we were in the same situation 2 years ago, which is hard to imagine, there are 2 major impediments to attacking middle school class size. The first is that we simply do not have the room within the middle school. Our analysis is that we would need to add 14 additional classroom teachers at the middle school to be able to increase each team. So to create an additional team or additional team in 7th and 8th grade, and to fulfill and make sure there was a full team, an additional team in the 6th grade. We applied to MSBA last year, which many thought was quite a quick focus and move. It was very well received. We did not get invited in, but we were highly, highly, highly encouraged to reapply. As I had said last year, we will continue to say, the MSBA, it's very rare that on the first try you get invited in. We knew that this was going to be a process. We knew it would be a multiple-year process. There were over 90 folks who applied. We made the first cut of 44 that they visited, and we have been told that we were very close. So we are going to continue to apply. Our application will be done as soon as we get through the budget process. Right, Mr. Mealy? Correct. And then English learners, as I talked about very quickly here, our plan here is to go to $32 to $34 to $36 an hour for our tutors. We think they deserve a consistent increase in pay. Again, we feel like we can do that through the student exchange program. Long term, it is my belief, I also believe Mr. Gilligan's, that we want to be able to have certified teachers. And so I think our plan is to add 1 certified teacher a year for the next 3 years. And we think that that would be a much better model for EL support. And then leadership structures is something else that's part of our strategic plan. We did make a significant change last year at the high school, where we now have department heads, basically, who are doing supervision and evaluation. From all reports, that has been very successful as we've had curriculum leadership at the high school. We need to do a similar review of the leadership structures at the middle school and at the elementary school. Our plan was to actually have a middle school proposal for this year, but as many of you may know, we are in the middle of a middle school principal search, as Dr. McQuaid is retiring at the end of this year, and we felt that it was not in anyone's best interest to create a whole new leadership structure without the new principal being on board. So we put that off for a year. But Mr. Mealy actually is in charge of that part of the strategic plan, and our plan is to have something for the FY20 budget for both the middle school and the elementary school. Do you want to do that one?
Sure.
Once they get lots of number, he talks.
So as we do every year, and if you've been on the committee, you know, the first thing we do is figure out what our level services are going to cost us. So that includes cost of living increases, inflation into contracted services or outside vendors, and contractual obligations with our employees. This year, and also working with Town Manager Andrew Maylor, we identify some possibilities of moving funds outside of our budget, in this case this year to the shared facilities. So water and sewer are no longer paid out of our budget, and the other one was?
Technology.
IT, right. Some more salary got moved into the IT shared department. And what that does is free up more funds in our operating budget. So our level services was 2.81%, and that's why you can see under maintenance and under technology, you see a negative number for percentage increase. And all the others are pretty close to what you would expect to see when we take into account those contracted increases, both step increases and percentage increases to the salary schedules and inflation to outside costs.
Yeah, and we had to go out to bid for new transportation contracts, so that's why that's slightly above the rest.
Exactly. It was actually, I anticipated it to be higher than it was. We only had one bidder, and fortunately came out in our favor. So it wasn't as much as I thought it was going to be.
So
that's not unusual, though. People figure that the existing vendor is going to know it has all the equipment already. There's no real startup cost to it. So a lot of them are just one bid things that happen when you try to get transportation. And then as Jen has outlined, our proposed increases are all related to the ECC. So the grand total increase, percentage increase, is 3.65%.
And then just a few charts. This is a slide I did last year that people really liked. How do each of our budget increases relate to our strategic plan? And, you know, again, the strategic plan is something that we all can talk about and we are all committed to, and you can see that they are part of what we are doing here. All right, a few charts just to that overview kind of what we had been saying that we prepared specifically for you guys is that's again the change on class sizes. And if you go to the next one, Mr. Mealy, you can see I did an analysis that basically said what would each additional teacher give us. So if you can see percent of class sizes over that first dot at 17.02%, and the numbers change like every day, by the way, because kids move in. So it's like this is a moving target a little bit. But you'll see that our proposal for this year is going to get us to about 17% of our classes above the class size average. As you go down, each class, so the next dot at 13.68 is one additional teacher. Next one is 2 additional teachers, 3 additional, 4. Obviously, there's not a completely, the increments aren't the exact same, because if you add 1 teacher where there are 4, now 4 classes are impacted. So if there's a grade level where there's 4 fourth grades and you add 1 teacher and make it 5, you now impact 4 classes. If you add 1 teacher at the school where there's only 2, you're only impacting 2 classes. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's not like it's this, very smooth line. It's close, but it's not completely smooth. So I just went through and just added classes. I did it alphabetically just because who knows where we would add them, but started with A. Atkinson. So just kept going. And so it would take us 6 teachers at this point to get it down to 0.
So does this include the English language class teachers you want to add, or are they kind of a separate?
So English
so
learners. Yeah, English
included in the
learners, think of
population.
English learner support as special education.
Okay.
Okay? So those kids are getting pulled out or pushed into support.
Right.
So
Okay.
and one of the questions that was asked, just to be very clear, is we are mandated by the state of Massachusetts to provide EL support for our kids. So if a kid's first language is not English, we need to make sure, and we are tested, kids are tested during a variety of tests. So we are giving those kids support. So think of EL teachers as not having a class where that, right? It's the support within.
Yep.
Yeah. That kind of support. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I need
Thanks.
to ask a question about this too. Go ahead.
Okay, so just for clarity purposes, so we can break it down. And
Yep.
So we can break this down a little bit. If we look at the school committee budget directives,
Yep.
the class size goals that they have outlined, how does that compare to the state average? That is the state average that's above, that's below.
So I provided all of that backup documentation in our budget proposal. So let me.
19 out of 406 districts. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, we continue, so 2 things I want to say about that. So we continue in our comparable districts, which is something the school committee uses, but also in the state district. We have larger average class sizes than all of our comparable districts, and we continue to lag behind at the state. I want to just say 2 things. First of all, if you look at that data, it's 1 year in arrears. So I think it's important to understand it's 1 year in arrears.
Okay.
Because that's just how it works. So I anticipate next year's data will look much better, right? And 2, we continue to be about $2,500 below the state average in per pupil spending. That being said, we are making significant progress on the goals. But remember, at this point, we're making progress on the elementary school class sizes, and our next one is the middle school class sizes.
Right.
So, but yes.
But so I guess I was just trying to
we
have
are-
like a framework of, I
Yep.
understand what was outlined as our goals, and where we are in achieving those, but how does that compare to
We
other?
continue to lag behind the state.
Right, okay, thank you.
And I did provide all of that comparable
Yeah,
data.
Yep.
Can I ask a question on this? It
Yep.
says right there where FY18 in the first column, FY19, and then so forth. So I see size FY19 budget, and then from there it says 1, 2, 3, 4
Yep.
to 6. So are you're saying in the FY19 we have budgeted for 1 teacher?
Nope. So at the FY19 budget, we will be reducing 29% of our classes being above from this year to 17. Why is that happening? That is all a direct result of opening the ECC.
Right.
And then, so when we go to FY19 plus 1, that would be backfilling
Right, so
one
if
of the
we could go
vacated.
FY19 with 6 teachers, we would be meeting our goals.
0.
Thank you.
I just did the analysis because I thought your questions.
I wanted to know the
This
number.
is really helpful.
Yep.
Thank you. We were trying to do it.
Yep, and here's the EL numbers that we presented earlier. You can see In 2008, we had 61 students up to 98. The percentages increased. We just thought the actual number was important. I'll also tell you, we did some really interesting analysis on this. This is end-of-year numbers. If you actually look on the DEAS website, these are not the numbers that you will find because they use October 1 numbers. And the difference between the October 1 numbers and the end-of-year numbers are significant every year because a lot of these students are kids who move into our district.
And I was going to ask, we do have fluctuation in and out. I mean,
Yes.
from what my kids hear,
Yep.
the kids are coming and going.
Yep, exactly.
So you're
But-
starting up with them, which is extra expense and time, and then they're leaving.
Correct. And I would say, on average, as we looked at the numbers, what we start in is lower than where we end every year.
Yep.
So that the biggest fluctuation would be over the summer.
So if I did simple math about head count, yep, you're achieving, you see within a couple budget cycles achieving your elementary
Yep.
class sizes. But if I did simple math as of today, it looks like you need 23 more heads in order to fulfill the goal.
Yes.
And that's today's goal,
Yeah.
really. Meaning that, as you're doing here, the other slide, the FY19, as your baseline. And if we could do it all magically today, we'd
I
have.
mean, with elementary, NAMS, and EL.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And I understand the NAMS comes with other
Yes.
Right.
baggage, so to speak, that you have to have. But I'm looking at 23.
Yeah, so, one of the things that we are excited about, I don't want to speak for you, Mr. Gilligan, but is if someone's, we have a plan. We know where we want to go, right? We know where we want to go. We know what our priorities are. We know what it's going to take to get there. And we are confident that we're going to get there. It's not about if, it's about rate and when.
And
Can I ask how long, over time period, these 23 bodies would be added?
Yeah.
How far out do we get in the
if we
future?
stuck to only inflationary increases to the
Yeah,
budget each
exactly.
year?
Right.
So, okay, so 2 questions on that. I think each of them we need to think about. So I think that you could get to 6 elementary teachers, assuming things continue in 2 years.
2 years.
I think that EL is probably going to be 3 if you're going to do the 2, if you're going to do both of them. The middle school, I cannot speak to. And I don't do that because I'm punting. But when you're talking about, are we going to get accepted into MSBA? If we do, that's a 7 or 8 year process to get an additional space, to get additional spaces. If we don't, is the town going to decide to do it anyways? And would that then be an accelerated process? Right.
So these are all
So
unknowable.
So I feel that the middle school, but I would have told you when I showed up, which is 2.5 years ago, I would say I don't know about the elementary school because right now I have
Right.
nowhere to put them.
Exactly.
So I am
It's the same
hopeful,
process.
given the process. I think, Andrew Maylor was very articulate when he did the vision.
Yeah.
He said, look, the middle school is what's ahead of us. We're all focusing on the middle school. We are clear that if we do that, there is going to need to be conversation about, a debt exclusion for that, and we need to start thinking about that as a community. It's wonderful. We're starting to talk about those things. So it's really going to be a question of time. I think the community, we've been talking about this with all sorts of members of the community. I think people are on board that the middle school is the next project for us.
So this looks like it's probably past the 5-year line.
Again,
I think we're looking probably at least 4 years in the future and probably 5.
yeah. Again, I think there's so many moving parts, right?
Right.
So you've got physical issues. You've got a building and how that's going to be funded. We also and how that's going to happen. And, the other thing is that there are a number of issues out there in terms of impacting the amount of funds available to North Andover, and there are. Obviously, the one you're going to speak about at the end of the evening, right?
Right.
And what impact is that going to have? And 2, if special education costs continue to go down out of district, I think sooner rather than later, you would actually be able to reallocate some of those funds to the regular education once the programs in-house are solidified. I think you're about a year or 2 away from that, so
Yeah.
there are potentially some there. And, there's a lot of pressure around this foundation budget review happening at the state level, which has a significant impact. I mean, that has been, if fully funded, you're looking at a multi-million-dollar increase specifically to North Andover.
You think that's going someplace?
Well, I think that there are really powerful, smart people who think that's the right thing to do. The Superintendent's Association is behind that. I think that that will probably be a campaign issue for the upcoming governor's election. And so I think either side, if that becomes a lightning rod issue, especially as the race happens, it might actually have impact regardless of the outcome. So I think that there are a number of different options to be able to accelerate this. The thing that we would say is we have a plan, and the rate is really going to be determined by a bunch of things.
And it would be safe to say, just to say it another way, that the middle school is not going to happen within, 4 years.
No, I mean, I think you're
It's not going to happen within
well,
4
I think
years.
I think the challenge is, I mean, could you do a few things at the middle school? Could you add another teacher and actually complete the full 6th grade team? I think that might happen within the next year or two. I really do think that would happen. But in terms of adding an additional team in 7th and 8th grade, you can't do that without additional space.
So we have to do the same thing for that school as you did for the kindergarten
As
situation.
we did for the
Go through
kindergarten.
each and every one of those schools and look at the physical layout, the number of square feet that you've got available, the building instruction, and try to
Yeah, and
squeeze it around. And if you can't, it's a new building.
and I would say that the middle school is not only about space, it's the driver, but I also think it's about program. If you go and look at the science classrooms within the middle school, they are not where they should be in terms of the current of 2018. So, I think that there's some real conversation about program. I think kind of increasing the science and technology component of that school, you would be able to enhance program and also size. It's not just building what we have, it's actually taking that school to the next level also.
Can I just ask a quick question on the 7 to 8 year again? Resubmitting the application to MSBA.
Yes.
And then what is the timeline again? That it's
So we
approved or declined within 6 months?
Yeah, so the process that we went through this year, we submit it by April.
Okay.
Yep. They kind of make the first cut by the end of summer.
Okay.
And then they vote it and we visit in the fall, and the vote this year was in December.
Okay.
So we would know in advance of budget season next year if we had been invited in or not.
And once you're invited in, then what's the time period between that and being final approved or not? Do you know?
Yeah, it's timeline to construction. Once you're invited in, you're moving in the right direction. There are a bunch of benchmarks, and so you kind of hit those different benchmarks. But the timeline from beginning to end is about 7 to 8 years. So
And so the 8th year is the school
Move
has
in.
been renovated.
And moved
That's
in.
what I'm asking, not approved for funding to
Yeah.
renovate. Okay, thank you.
But there's as you may see in the news,
no.
there's a lot of hurdles. So, Lowell High School is having a massive issue
doubt.
around where.
Yeah.
Then you have to go out, there's going to need to be some conversations about funding. I would assume a
Yeah.
debt exclusion. You got to get the town to approve that. I mean, there's a lot of hurdles you have to go on the process. And they walk you through those hurdles and
But you have to make it through every one.
you got to make them through all the hurdles.
Yep.
No doubt. And again, I see that as a conversation that lies ahead. As we had with the kindergarten building, I see that as a conversation that lies ahead. Here's the out-of-district tuition. You will notice that out-of-district, it's not surprising to those of you who've been on the FinCom for a while, increased dramatically. Hence the creative solution of the stabilization fund, right? I mean, that was incredibly important during that time. We've been able to hold out-of-district costs steady for the last few years, which actually is a very positive thing. To be able to reduce them is really exciting. So you can see that that's the trajectory there.
That's an offset of the special ed build-out partly, isn't it?
Yes, I mean
Okay, we could bring some of them back
correct.
into our district versus send out.
It's
Okay.
absolutely. I mean, it's a commitment
Yeah, it's
of
great.
building strong programs
Right.
and being able to support kids. It helps in a number of ways. It helps bring kids back, and then it
also
helps
inclusion.
not have. It helps, and then it also helps that kids aren't going out.
Yeah.
So it's a trend that we are very excited about, and frankly, you don't see that trend often.
No.
You had asked specifically about the Medicaid reimbursement. Here is the exact expenditure. So we were allocated $250,000. I think we have $630 left. You wouldn't want us to, yeah, approximately. So actually, it's Yeah, there we go. And you can see that it's exactly as we said we were going to spend it. The vast majority of it is on the math. It's also the next generation science standards at the middle school. And then Foundations, which is a reading program. We bought a huge part of that, and we also had a very generous donor who helped support that. So we were able to go K to 2 in 2 years. Again, that we planned to go K, 1, 2 in 3 years, but we had a generous donor, so we were able to go from 3 to 2 years.
Is that a local private donor?
A local, the Warden family.
Thank you.
So there's an example. We had a plan, and we got additional funds, so we were able to go quicker, right?
What's going on with Medicaid going forward? Because we were talking last year about it continued to be reduced, wasn't it?
That's a great question. Let me, and then also just last thing I want to say is the beginning of our next, in our strategic plan talks about going to reading. So we did writing first, math second, reading is next, and we actually piloted a whole bunch of reading materials through these classroom libraries to try to make sure that the reading approach we were going to focus on was working. So that was a pilot that we supported. So what's the deal with Medicaid? So we don't anticipate any change, actually just a continuation of increase. The biggest challenge for Medicaid is at the federal level with the Affordable Care Act. So your guess is as good as mine. And I think for me to say anything other than that is crazy, right? Yep. So, this could be significantly impacted if there is a significant change at the federal level. We just keep putting our head down and hoping that it doesn't happen.
So that's one of those contingencies
Yeah, it's one of those.
in your field of vision.
Yeah. And do remember, this fund is a revolving account held by the town, can only be used for curriculum and professional development. It's something that I spoke about a few years ago, saying when times get tough, this is the first place that superintendents go to.
Yep.
And I am, I feel that this is something that will now, if protected, will be able to ensure that we have the curriculum resources. We are still in the catch-up phase. In a bunch of places.
Yeah.
We will catch up if this continues for 4 or 5 more years. I'm confident we will catch up. Mr. Gilligan's meeting tomorrow with the high school and middle school department coordinators to talk about, we have textbooks that you're learning history, and they're in the 1990s. So we've got some catch up to do. We'll get there. We are confident we will get there over the next few years. But then it allows us to sustain and grow. We didn't do a lot of catch up this year because we felt so strongly about rolling out a Eureka Math program at K to 6 and the next generation science. But especially if we were able to increase the amount we have access to and the amount we were able to bring in, we feel we can simultaneously roll out a reading program, continue to support science at the middle school, and start to really catch up.
What is being done? This private donation was wonderful.
Yep.
Very much a help. Is there more education being done with the public in our town about the fact that private donations help?
So we do have a schools foundation, and they've been trying to work hard on that. One of the things I've been talking to them about is would they be able to accelerate our reading program? So the reading program, the classroom libraries are very expensive, and so we've been talking about how can we leverage that. And how can we have that foundation help us? So do we count on that? Again, for me, we are going to do what we can do every year, and any additional funds would be an accelerant on the plan, as with the foundations. Now we have foundations K to 2, which is really what our goal was. That's what the research says, and our kids we're seeing incredible impact as a result of that. And then I think. We also, was that the last one? That's it. So that's what we've prepared to answer your questions and to give you an overview.
A couple specific questions
Yeah.
for me. At the last school committee meeting, you mentioned that the school nurse, which is identified as a half full-time equivalent, is really, you can't have a half. You have a full-time person, and the other half of the cost, because that's what we're really talking about when we're saying full-time equivalent, is the cost is being paid for by grant.
Yeah.
Is that grant? Not too yet. Will that grant be in place the following years to pay for that position? And are there other positions that are being paid in part by grants?
Yes, we do have. We do have grants. There are different types of grants. So a number of our special education positions are actually paid by a grant that we apply for every year. And we count on that grant. That's a grant that every district counts on. It's something that we know that's going to come every year. There's other grants that have come from the federal level, Title I and Title IIA. They pay for some positions, but also some resources. As with Medicaid, the current administration, we're concerned about both Title I and Title IIA. DeVos has not seen that she's going to be spending a lot of money on those programs. It's a concern for us, something we track very carefully. And then there are grants that we kind of are competitive go for at the state. Cheryl Barzak has been incredible in getting grants for our nurses. She's really a leader among the lead nurses in the state of Massachusetts. She will continue to apply for that. However, we are not sure about that. And if that happens, as with the kindergarten grant, when that went away, we will need to make that up. And it's something that, especially working with Andrew, has been great. We assumed the kindergarten grant would come through. It didn't come through. He helped us close that gap for a year so that we had time to budget it. And that has been kind of the relationship between the schools and the town is, in the best faith, I create a budget. If for something happens that best faith comes through, we've been able to close that gap in not having a negative immediate impact. And then the following year, we put it right back into the budget. So we were able to close that gap. So it's, yeah.
Clearly, we see that positive relationship, and I think it's great. And so I have to sometimes flip my hat around a little bit to be the bean counter or the CPA or whatever, or the Tschirhart. So I know that the town manager, the town actually absorbs here and there some of the costs that you have been incurring. Any way to quantify that? Question one. I'm not really poking to say, can you quantify it? But the other part too is when we talk about cost per pupil, do we consider any of the things that the town has taken over relative to the cost per pupil?
So we did make a list of the different ways in the last few years. So we didn't quantify each of them. Some are very difficult to quantify, but if I just go over that, and then cost per pupil, I'll ask you to answer that because you do the end of year report. So a few things. First of all, the full day K, that was a lot of help. If you remember the special ed stabilization fund that you guys are intimately involved in, the Medicaid, moving maintenance and technology, we continue to move some positions into shared services. That's had a significant impact. The solar savings, so the Osgood project that negotiated a 15% savings. We are the biggest consumer, so actually any of those things actually help us the most.
Sure.
Right? Because we are the biggest consumer of everything. And so if there is a savings on electricity or gas, it becomes us. The ESCO project. So all of those have had, each year it's kind of been some way to help us reduce level services costs so that we can actually increase spending more. In terms of how those per pupil numbers get quantified, we have to do something at the end of the year that Jim does. And so I think the answer is yes, but I'll allow you to explain that.
Yeah, as best they can, they want to compare apples to apples.
Right.
Because some districts will have benefit costs within the budget, and others will not. They'll have what we do, which is it's indirect costs. But all of those are brought together at the end of year and reported by all school districts, and that's what the number is based on for the average per pupil amount.
So you're able to pull in things that have been provided to you as costs?
So
or?
you have categories for the general fund, you have grants and revolving accounts, and you have indirect costs. Those are all brought together to determine our total spending.
Well, so I guess the question really is that if as an example, the water and sewer won't be in the next numbers, or they will be in the next numbers by?
We'll have to talk about the indirect costs because, for instance, snow removal does not appear in our budget, but it appears in the indirect cost category.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty extensive. It really is apples to apples.
That's what I was really looking at.
Yes.
Yep.
Some schools pay health insurance, some towns pay health insurance. That's a big driver. It gets counted for both.
Okay. Team, any other questions? So, top holes, top 3 or 4 items you're looking at over 5 years, what things are like would keep you awake or not keep you awake?
So Keith, today it kept me awake. I think we've said it. I think we need to continue to get our elementary class sizes down. That doesn't keep me awake. That's going to happen as long as things continue. I think that's going to get there. I think the thing that I think most strategically about is the middle school. I think that is, as we thought strategically about the K. I think that's the next strategic lever for our schools.
Too bad we can't do that modular.
Yeah, I don't think that would work. But
Just a quick question about that. So at what point do towns typically decide, okay, we're going to figure out how to fund this ourselves? This process is taking too long. Our community has decided it's no longer appropriate for us to wait. At what point do you reach that kind of that critical point, and how do you deal with that as a community?
I think there's two parts of that. One is I think the first year after filing is not the right year, right? I think you do it at least 2 or 3 times before you get there. I don't know what the number is, but somewhere does that. Andover just had this conversation. They had a full townwide conversation about do we just self-fund some of these and not wait for MSBA? The other thing is that there are a number of competing there are competing needs here within the town. I mean, I have come to believe very strongly in the competing need of the senior center. I think the current senior center is not providing the support that our seniors need, and I'm very supportive of a new senior center. And so I think, I think as we think about it, of course I think about the schools, but truly I think we have to think about the town too. And so, so I think it has to be, not just a school decision. I think it needs to be a town decision, and done in a way that really thinks about the different needs. For instance, I just bring up the senior center because I'm in it, and I just don't think it's meeting the needs of our seniors.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a healthy view.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really complicated question, right? And I appreciate it because it's and the complication is, it's not a 5-minute complication as it is, but certainly the question is worth asking. The real difficulty is, what does that mean, right? So when we take this project, do we really know what we have an anticipated cost of this middle school project? We have all, when Dr. Price and I say we literally mean we, right? The entire community. We are committed that the middle school is the focus of our educational physical plan, because without doing that, we can't get to some of the chairman's comments. How do we bring those classroom sizes down? We just can't with the physical plant that exists. More problematic for me if I was a parent is not just the classroom size, I can't deliver the program. The programs. Right? And so, I guess it's a value judgment, but I'd rather have, if I had choices, I'd pick the program, in size, but I'm not an educator. But within those choices, we want to satisfy both, right? All true. I think the complication becomes, if I said to you, we can have the middle school, but we can't have those other elementary schools on the master plan, and we can't update a debt service cost now is going to escalate to the extent that it's not 3.65, but 2.25 on a budget. I've been around the block enough, as you can tell by the lack of hair and general age. The idea of going forward with, we'll go pay for the school, and by the way, then want an operational override. Those are almost like the mixed metaphor of financial planning, because no one's going to trust the process. So we have to rely on the fact that we have a compelling argument with the Commonwealth that the middle school needs to be fixed. We may not like the schedule, because when we make decisions, we're all impatient in a good way, right? And we want all this to happen more quickly than it probably does. But we recognize that in the end, we're stewards, and it may not happen when we want or to affect us individually at the time we want, but we're trying to do what's right for the entire community. And so I believe, sitting through that process with Dr. Price leading it, that the state understands the need of this building, and we shouldn't get too impatient about the fact that the state process takes a little bit of time. I think it is remarkable that Dr. Price and her team brought us to the point that we made that first cut, because quite frankly, internally, we didn't think so. We also didn't think the Patriots were going to come back in the fourth quarter. So, right? So with that said, I think we're going to just have to be patient, because I do think if we started to have a real detailed question and answer around that question, we're going to make a lot of people really uncomfortable about things, and my broader concern is that what we've done really well, and I believe better than anybody else in the state, is we talk about and we plan better than anybody else, and we deliver on the results of those things, and so it's a really great question. I'd ask you to table it for maybe a year and a half or 2 years and see where we go.
No, that's really helpful, thank you.
Anything else?
I would add to that we have seen over this 6-year time period the reduction of competition between departments and resources. Everyone knows that if they wait their turn, they're going to get it. It's not a matter of just jumping in the middle of the pie and grabbing a piece and dragging it off. We had way too much of that a long time ago.
You know, the other thing I would say is, you know, I've been incredibly impressed by the schools. You know, this year, unlike any of the other 2 years, we have a single focus. Every principal at every level can understand and understands that single focus. And at no point is it become, well, you're just doing the ECC, right? We all get it. We know where we're headed. And, you know, the high school and the middle school knows that this is not their year. And we've got them focused for next year. So, I mean, I think it's, I think that that's also between department, but I would also say within the school department.
I know we're wrapping up. Just one more question. The programming challenges, specifically you talked about science in the middle school, how does that impact students and their ability to then be at an appropriate high school level? So if you're feeling like the programming is lacking, our facilities are sorely lacking at that level, I mean, how does that leave us when they now get to a high school level and compared to their peers in other districts?
Yeah, so, you know, the science is a good example. Can I just go deep on that for a moment? Because our science labs are not what they should be.
Okay.
I think there's not a person in the around who would argue that they are. So yet we have been a leader in the state of implementing the next generation science standards. Many districts are just starting that. We put them in place last year in 6th grade. They're now in 7th grade. So we are not kind of waiting around. And so, you know, we are working, Carol Arkham, our science and math K-12 person, has been working on state groups, has really been kind of a leader in the state around that. And so there are some challenges. Most of them, if you've been in any of our classrooms, are really just physical, and kids are pretty adaptive. So I am not seeing that we are kind of like waiting on anything. We are moving forward, and in true kind of North Andover teacher and student fashion, we're quite resilient, and we're also quite creative in how we make things work. And I've been in lots of science classrooms at the middle school, and you know, the kids are incredible, as you've got a bunch of kids packed into these rooms where barely there's enough room for them to sit, and they're making it work. So I think that's just a good example. Like, we're leading, we're out front on the next generation science standards with probably some of the most subpar science labs in the state.
Okay. So which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And the short answer is that they're actually, you know, we're in a better position than some of our comparable
Yes,
districts.
because, you know, because we are continuing the curriculum push.
Okay.
And we're not waiting for these.
Facilities.
to match.
Yeah.
How could you, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I think
hold
it's,
off on the science.
I just
teaching
think
for
that's a
while.
really good example because, you know, most districts are not really implementing the next generation science standards at the level we are.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And we're seeing, just last thing, you know, in science, we're seeing from MCAS results that our kids are doing extremely well in science.
Okay.
So I say this, we may have a few more questions that may come your way.
Yep.
I'm not sure, but we'll figure that out later on. But I do have to say that from the budget process and the execution to the budget process, the collective team I see in front of me has been phenomenally great. You guys would do great in business. But more important to me that I've seen that you don't see in this budget process, that's a great budget, but is the actions taken behind the scenes to reduce sped, to do the next generation science, the things that you don't see in the numbers. And it has so much more value. And if I wish I could put a dollar sign on those things, you can with the sped. But it is so important for me to see that it's just not the budget. It's the stuff that's going to be behind the scenes. So thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
We will stay as Mr. Maylor presents in case there's something else.
Thank you for asking.
Jen?
Here we go, we're gonna sit. Moral support.
We'll see if we can answer the questions the same way.
Mr. Maylor, when are you going to build the middle school?
Is there a problem at the middle school?
Don't ask that
This is a science
question.
class, you know?
Don't ask.
I'm reliving my childhood. I was horrible in middle school. So I'm reliving my childhood.
Now that we're talking about it, I'm wondering if they look the same from when I was in middle school. I'm picturing them.
Don't go.
like, just
A little
They
beaten up.
We asked our town manager, Andrew Mealy, to the table to answer a few questions relative to the capital improvement budget, the 5-year plan, as well as some other odd questions here and there that helps educate the team. It's really an education sometimes that makes us better people. So I will go through the questions that we do have, and also the team members, please chime in on anything that's, I know you will anyways. What is the percentage revenue allocated between town and school?
With this budget cycle or overall?
This, as an average, overall, and in this budget cycle?
So I'll give you a little bit, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm becoming a little bit of a budget historian, which is, and
It's okay.
I'm going on my 7 years, so Stan's the real historian, but it certainly have a little bit of history to it. We historically, in the past, kept this 66-33 relationship. We've varied from that over the last several years to really look at projects, what's important. In this particular budget, I would expect the schools will be a 3.65% increase. I'd expect the aggregate of all other departments not to exceed 3.14%. You'll see individual departments for any number of reasons that may be at 3.5 or somewhere in that range, and you'll see others that'll be at 2.5 and 2%. But in aggregate, the aggregate of the remaining budgets will not exceed 3.14%.
And again, it'll be a 66-33%.
Nope, it hasn't. So again, sort of historically speaking, what we used to do is sit in a room, and in essence, after the process was decided how many dollars there were, make sure we do simple math and just allocate the dollars on that path. We have varied from that beginning now 7 budget cycles ago and evaluate each and every request on its merits in the context of what the Revenue and Fixed Cost Review Committee says is available in terms of dollars. So in no year has it followed that sort of standardization from the first 10 years of this decade where we sat there and just simply said, here's the dollars in aggregate that we have for spending, 90 million, 80 million, 88 million, depending on what year it was, and simply multiply by 0.66, 6666, and 0.33. We literally take each and every year and each and every request and evaluate it on its merits. It's why we do things like curriculum funds, and in this particular year, schools have higher funding, and in some years adding library staff, and other years doing things to the police department. So we no longer look at the calculation. I would tell you my guess is, if you look at the pie chart that we've presented over time, the school funding as a total is probably higher than the 66%. It has grown over that time. But in fairness, it's a community-wide focus to understand things like how do we drive down classroom size. So when you set broader objectives and the focus becomes those objectives, the focus we purposely lose focus on those things that are simply about how do we, without any real forethought, distribute budget allocations. So for instance, the budget document that goes out to departments no longer says, hey, by the way, increase your budget by X. Mm-hmm. It says, tell me what level of services is, and then tell me what other programs you're going to provide, and then we'll evaluate those in the context of available dollars.
And that goes into that point system or that numeric system?
No, that's simply on the
Sequencing?
capital. We're
That's
talking
capital.
about operating budget. Yep.
So, on that,
Yes.
I understand the process, but what turned out to be a little bit of a turn or a twist on it was how Ray took so much credit for actually putting the numbers together to make it all happen. I understand when you have multiple variables that you put together, you vector in on the right answer. Could you speak to how you prioritize your capital improvement?
On the
besides
capital
Ray?
plans? Yeah. Ray does it. No. So, whatever worked. I think, again, in the long term, on the larger scale projects, it's all about what we've done to prepare to understand how the future is going to look. So as an example, when we prepare a facility master plan, we have 7 years to do things. We've now set that 7-year priority, right? When we do the same thing on rolling stock, or we talk about roadway plan, and we have a 5-year roadway plan. Every road is identified what work is going to be done on that roadway. You can look up the plan, you know your street, you know the work's going to be done. Every resident can know when their street's going to be impacted, not only the next 5 years, but the 5 years after that, or whether it's not going to be paved if they're not so happy with that one. And so when you start to develop plans on the larger funding mechanisms of a capital plan, then in essence, it answers itself, right? Is that you're going to put every money into the roadway projects, and here's the plan. It's how do you begin that process, and that was many years ago. Several years ago, we decided to take a longer look than just the one-year look. And what we've conveyed to this group over the years is that you used to get a 5-year capital plan where it showed 5 years and say fiscal 12. Fiscal 12 was really what we're asking the funding for, but you saw 13, 14, 15, and 16. And then in 13, you got the request, except 13 didn't look like it looked in the previous year's book. We just hoped you didn't look back, right? And more often than not, a lot of people don't. And then we rolled out 14, 15, 16, and 17, and we got to 14, and we did the same thing. We don't vary that often here. We certainly have varied some cases in this particular proposal. Last year's proposal was to increase money for kindergarten because we had a broader goal and we needed to change the funding. This year, really largely due to inflation and changing the program, we're doing a little bit of that around the senior center. But by and large, we try to own these, and we commit departments to say, if you need something, the same thing Jen talked about, which is really important, telling a department they're not getting it this year, but saying your turn is coming is so essential in building the trust to make sure that departments ask for only what they need when they need it. So the point system is valid. It helps us tell things like, is this really urgent? You know, radios now, to your question of how come we're buying police radios but fire radios 2 years later? Because the useful life for those radios are different, when they were purchased is different, and the importance is different. So the number system is valid. Is there some massaging between the calculations to make sure we prioritize things? Certainly there is.
Yep, we saw that. And again, you mentioned the police radio because I brought it up. And my intention there had nothing to do with the timing. It had to do more with the technology, making sure that we were completely in sync. And that was addressed last meeting, so.
Sure.
I'd like to move on to the senior center and how that all evolved and came about relative
Yeah.
to the changes. I mean, when do the citizens, have people spoken to you about the senior center? Oh, sorry, I'm going to be a recipient of it, a beneficiary of it as well. But
You like people who stay in town and pay their property
that's
taxes?
right. That's right.
Good.
So help us through the process of why this path we're taking. And
The current path or the overall need for a senior center?
I'm sorry.
The current path or the overall discussion of the need for senior center improvements?
Both, really.
Okay, so let's start with, again, we have a facility master plan. First contemplated in 2010, a committee was formed, came forward with a plan. The problem with the plan was there was no plan to fund it. And the problem with the plan was the priority order of the project was probably not appropriate. So we took that plan, first developed in fiscal 2010, worked with the school department and others and said, okay, how do we find a way to actually pay for this? And so we altered the order of the projects to accomplish two things: address certain needs in an order which made more sense, and two, to pay for it. So we have probably the only facility master plan in the Commonwealth funded inside of a capital plan that actually is being honored, actually completed. So that's the baseline. First project, Kittredge Gymnasium, one of the smallest project we have, and for many ways for me remains the most important project we've done. It solved a fairly discrete, easy to address problem and got folks to realize that it was important, and quite frankly was a jumping off point for the rest of the projects in many ways. And so all the projects that are identified there started as part of that plan. We may have altered the scope in now 1.5 of the projects, the kindergarten being most notable. I say the senior center not so much. But we've honored the commitment of 2012 town meeting by delivering on all 7 projects over a period of time. So that was with the help of a consultant, let's look at the facilities, we'll see where the priority is, how do we sort of roll that out, and then working with staff to find a way to fund it. That's the facility master plan. We're proposing facility master plan 2. We make some guesses as to what the future is going to look like, but ultimately we're going to need a consultant to evaluate the buildings and prioritize those needs and how to pay for them. So 2 obligations: fix the buildings and how do you pay for it and get it passed. There was an interesting note. In 2012 we went to town meeting. Town meeting was pretty good about it and funded the first year's project. And in fiscal 13 we came back And there was it was a greater debate about the facility master plan. So what we felt was a really good thing moving forward, and it was all going to sort of roll smoothly through. Some people had a real issue with this building. They challenged the need for this building. Interesting enough, one of the items not identified is the school department used to pay $100,000 to $120,000 in rent. The debt service is now shared across the budget, and therefore they don't pay the rent anymore. And there are other costs associated with the building. And with that, there was a really interesting discussion that took place in town meeting floor. And I remember one person who was well known in the community and largely affiliated with the school said, all we ever ask our public officials to do is plan. And the first time they actually develop a plan, we debate whether or not we want to honor the plan. And what had been a pretty aggressive debate quickly moved to a motion on the vote, which passed unanimously. And for us, I'll always remember the time because it was very interesting. Like someone who didn't have a particular interest in that project recognized the benefit to long-term planning, and it has motivated us in a lot of different areas. So that's the broader view of the plan. As it relates specifically to this, not unlike the kindergarten, we continue to evaluate the projects to see how the world's changing. Our senior center facility was something else in the past. It was not a senior center. Look back to the 80s when it served in different capacities. And so we took, at a time when senior centers were not as in vogue or as popular, and we took what we had as an asset and we opened the doors. And we made some additional improvements some years later. But in the end of the day, going back to program, just like the middle school does not meet the programmatic needs that we want it to meet, the senior center does not meet the programmatic needs. But in the context of looking at our ability to pay, that was the best we can do when we contemplated this plan in 2012. A lot has transpired since 2012. We're now in 2018. We understand our population of seniors better. We understand the opportunities better. And quite frankly, we're a heck of a lot better off financially. So we could do something originally proposed as $1.5 million for classrooms. We were able to add $4 million to that and some other consideration by the school committee and build a kindergarten facility because we recognized that the programmatic needs and the space needs were important and we could pay for it, something we certainly couldn't have done in the first 10 years of the decade. So both are the same things. It's just about a different kind of project with a different program. We continue to evaluate. The programmatic need of our seniors is changing. We want younger seniors. You can't have younger seniors, I guess. We recognize that the 60-year-old senior is a different person than the 60-year-old senior 10 years ago. And if you can't provide the kind of dynamic space, they're not coming. But we want them to come. We want them to use the facility. So we need a more dynamic space that represents the senior needs. It's a programmatic change, just like the kindergarten, just like the middle school. And we can afford today to do it differently than we originally contemplated when the plan was first contemplated in 2010. And we do that by supporting it with some additional one-time revenue. Two, we have the extraordinary ability to be able to partner on a private sector level, and I'm still working out the details of, to make sure that we can put the senior center as a standalone space. It represents the next generation and our obligation to stewardship for seniors going up the next 20 or 30 years, whether we are here or not, physically in town or otherwise. And it makes sure that we can satisfy that by building a standalone space where we're not going to pay for the land. And a back-end result of that is we're going to free up a parking lot that some days is really crowded. Because in the absence of that, if we build the senior center on its existing site, we're going to have to acquire land on Main Street at costs well into the seven-figure range, and then we're going to have to break down buildings so we can create parking. I'm not sure that's really economic development, right? So I think it provides the benefit of both worlds. We could not have afforded this option in 2010 or 2012. We can afford it today. So we should do it. That's my pitch.
Follow-up question
Yes,
to that,
yes.
if you don't mind. So that's great, and we understand that. My follow-up question was on this land donation that you're working out. Is it located next to commercial land that can be developed?
It is located on a space that is. It's located on a space privately owned that. I have to be cautious. It's located on a piece of land that I assume will be developed or redeveloped.
Okay.
So this will not just be someone donating land that otherwise has commercial property that is going away. This will result in things other than the senior center.
Thank you.
And add taxes as a baseline level.
That's
moving forward.
what I was looking
Yep.
at.
And enhance the community, right?
Yep.
Yeah, of course.
Whole thing.
And the seniors can
You know
walk
what I
to
was
it.
asking, yeah.
The seniors will certainly be able, our goal when trying to look for an alternative space was to be within 1 mile of the existing senior center because the seniors rely on downtown. That's an increased challenge, right? So those who can't, we get a fair amount of seniors that drive. Some will drive, some will get there by the shuttle. Maybe they walk, but they put them in a place where they're comfortable in terms of a general sense of where the community lies. We can't put a senior center in our country, quite frankly. Seniors aren't going. It's not what they're familiar with from a community perspective. And quite frankly, as we see the downtown revitalizing, jump-starting off the mills, and what we think eventually will be spillover from the mills into the Main Street area, and we have a post office and CVS and those kind of places where seniors want to go, we want to be within a mile of that. We don't want to take the economic engine, which are seniors, and move them away from what we want to have economic improvement. Beyond that, I can't share a thing.
That was good enough.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't need to ask about fire station.
Any other questions? I think we're good.
We're good.
Great.
Thank you.
So I'll bore you with a repetitive thing that we've said all night. You too should take significant credit in what we have been able to get done. We often, probably to a fault, right? We sit there and say 2 consecutive years, 3 consecutive years, 6 consecutive years, and we always rope in the Board of Selectmen and School Committee, as we should, right? We sometimes leave you guys out. You have been thoughtful. You push back where appropriate. You ask the right questions. You make us go back, scratch our heads, sometimes say, who the heck is that person? All those things you're supposed to do, right? But in the end, that's all part of the process. And the public expects the process and expects the dialogue. But you two have been partners in the sense that you ask the right questions, push us on the right points, make us think in more creative ways to try to find ways to do things that are best for the community. And in the end, town meeting trusts you to do that. And we can show up and we can advocate for all those good things that we seek. Town meeting wouldn't likewise support consensus if the Finance Committee did not support consensus. There would be this debate on the floor, and it would be the schools versus the police or the fire. So we appreciate what you do in terms of developing the trust with the community and town meeting, because we need that.
So I was around the first decade of this century, and it was pretty ruckus. So I do have one question, and it's almost like the third rail kind of question. And I don't mean to put you on the spot. OPEB.
Yeah.
It's $106 million liability. 109?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Am I right? Just grew.
Yeah.
Grows every day.
I'm
gonna put it on a billboard.
Price of the number keeps on
I'm
moving.
going to put it on a billboard. Yeah, I like that. I just
Right when you
OPEB.
walk in, like you're,
Did
you're
you
walking
know?
around the Wall Street Mall. Yeah.
I like it.
How do you address the third rail?
Yeah, I think, so I have, I hope that so what I'm going to express to you is what I view as sort of the pragmatic view of OPEB. And time will tell whether or not this is sort of the correct view or it should be something more aggressive. A liability is a liability, right? And so beyond the accounting nature of it, currently we're not required to do anything but report the OPEB liability. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't pay attention to it. Certainly the level of conversation about OPEB was 0 in 2011 or 12 and has increased, and it should be. From my perspective, we just need to remain interested in OPEB to a level where those folks who care about that, and I don't just mean the community, because it's really hard to resonate. You're not going to go into the dinner party and say, do you want to talk about OPEB, right? It doesn't, I'm not sure if it comes up a lot in the school committee.
I hope you're not going
No,
into
I'm
it.
not. And I'm pretty boring. So I'm not sure that it comes up a lot in school committees and other settings. And even when it's mentioned at a selectmen's meeting, right? What is that all about? I think we need to remain focused on what it is, not get carried away with setting unrealistic expectations, but remain focused on it. It is a $109 million liability. And so sometimes I hear about folks that says, well, if the state mandated funding tomorrow and did so on a funding schedule like a retirement schedule, the town would be in a really bad spot. It might be 8-9 million, right? We would be in a bad spot. I really don't expect that. Now, I'm not minimizing the expectations of the requirements. I recommended the formation of the OPEB committee. I hope from that comes some really meaningful change. Benefits are important to employees, but there are costs to benefits, and we need to be cognizant of that as well. We need to make sure we continue to set dollars away. I just don't want to create the tone that says, if we don't fix the full liability tomorrow, the world is ending. I don't want to drive decisions on any number of topics based upon, that construct. I think we need to remain focused. I met with the bond rating agencies on Monday. That's what they want to hear, right? We know what OPEB is. We know what it represents. We know how it's going to be reported, and we're doing something. So when I say to them, we have an OPEB committee, we put money into an OPEB trust. It's with PRIT. Every year we put so many dollars in the operating budget. We pay attention to health insurance costs. That's what they want to hear. And so I believe the only risk is to lose focus. I don't as much buy into the risk that it is a game changer tomorrow or the next day. Even if it goes from footnote to balance sheet as it will, it is going from footnote to balance sheet on every single balance sheet of every entity that reports such a balance sheet. And rating agencies aren't going to universally say everybody is downgraded by X amount of credit. We just need to remain focused, and I feel really good about the fact that we've got a group of folks who are going to spend a lot of time on it and come back with real advice and direction. And if we honor that, I think we'll be fine.
So 2 thoughts on what you just said.
Yeah.
One, the bond rating agencies have already taken consideration that debt, whether it be a footnote or not, on the
Correct.
books. So that's a fact. The second thing is that I'm concerned about, and I don't have the statistics or the data right now, is the increasing amount of pay-as-you-go and how that's changing and growing. And I just heard you saying controlling healthcare costs is important to keep that down. But it is taking more and more of the annual operating budget away from other elements of the town. That's probably a concern that we ought to be focusing on. So it's not, you're right, it's not doom and gloom.
What do you mean by that?
Why are you concerned about that?
Pay as you go? Because
Yeah.
I'm looking at long term, 5 years, 10
This
years.
is what OPEB does.
Is it growing,
Well, I didn't-
growing more than we're paying into it?
So my only concern is that the amount that we actually pay is growing faster. Maybe I don't have a
Yeah,
concern.
well, I would say, let me separate pay-as-you-go from that conversation. We are not, and many entities are not. I mean, I'm not sure I can identify entities that can, but I'm sure there are some who could have the budget capacity to use pay-go as a method of funding OPEB. It becomes one component to a broader strategy. So pay-go may be 50,000 into OPEB, or 250 into OPEB, or 200 into OPEB. And we move other reserve dollars, as we've done the last couple of years, to move money out of that OPEB stabilization. We're going to recommend this year we close that, move it into PRIT. And we then use other reserve funds to put into that, and maintaining health insurance costs and all those other things. So I agree with you that I would not see OPEB as the game changer. Excuse me, I would not see pay-go into OPEB as the game changer, because quite frankly, from our budget structure perspective, that's not who we're going to be. And so maintaining the liability as best we can. We went from our previous health insurance coverage, self-insured Blue Cross, to GIC. It was a more than $20 million reduction in OPEB. And the restating of the current accounting rules just increased that back up by $20 million. So it's nice that those accountants can change rules and cost us $20 million. So it's a multi-headed dragon, and therefore a multifaceted response. But I wouldn't see that pay-go is going to be anything in terms of it's not going to be a major player to the response, because quite frankly, budgetarily, we couldn't sustain that.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Just curious, is every
Sure.
town equally impacted? In other words, we're 109 on a $106 million budget. Is Andover 160
Yes.
and
higher.
160 budget?
Yes.
Much higher.
It is.
It's higher because, and I haven't looked at Andover's specific number. My guess is the number of employees per dollar spent on number of employees per capita there would be higher. Municipal employees dramatically higher,
Right.
because they have approximately the same population but 50% more equalized value. So they have a budget which is 50% larger, even though the populations are similar.
Right.
And because they have more employees, they have more retirees. They also are not in a GIC-like plan. They're in a little more of an aggressive plan. And so I would expect, if we compare it as, would look good. But every community in some form or another is in the same spot, with a few exceptions that have been really aggressive and are really financially well off.
Yeah, Wellesley.
Good pick. Wellesley and others who even with the retirement paid those things off
But
early.
this is in every state as well.
Every state as well.
And yet, if you just got something from Charlie Baker, many of you may have gotten it too.
Yeah.
We're almost #1 in everything right now, including economic growth, so if one state's wealthy enough and not, I mean, we're not New Jersey, not New York, you would think that we would be the state that could probably make the most progress on it, but I don't seem to get the feeling that it's attacked at the state level. Am I not right?
Well, I think, without, we're living, I'm living, I guess we're all living through some recent decisions by the Health Insurance Agency for the Commonwealth, where they dropped a series of plans that our employees are in, and they went to plans primarily around benefit design and cost recovery. That was for two reasons. One's a little bit around the mass health question, but the other, I assume, is a function of the fact that they needed to keep premiums down to address their own OPEB liability, right? So even the state's dealing with that, and so every community in some way or another, whether they're financially well enough to address it directly or not, but everybody's dealing it the same way. We're now required to do actuarial studies on OPEB liability. It just wasn't a requirement 5 years ago. Now every depending on the size of the budget, either every other year or every year we have to do a actuarial study, and we get the data back so we can track it so that we can report it. I think we're in the upper third of communities that are talking about it, meaning we're talking about it aggressively and having developing a plan. And I think right now that's what's most important.
Ed, on our committee that's been formed due to this prompting, we're going to be doing comparables to other towns and look at other states, what they're doing, what their debt is, and so forth. So, yeah.
Which is really
we'll
helpful
bring
data.
that to you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep, really good stuff.
It's overwhelming.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you. Can we flip and approve the minutes first, or maybe? No, maybe not. We
So
can't.
we're going to move it to the approved minutes first. It'll be fast.
I just had two comments on page 2 of the minutes. We talked about the senior center, and Ray responded. I thought that I had asked the question about would the new build on the donated land cost more than the renovation of the current senior center? And maybe that's irrelevant because it's captured in our video. Like, we don't have to have it stated here.
Oh.
But we did talk about that. Is that what this plan was discussed and ours was questioned? Is that,
I think you
That's
did
covered?
ask the question, and he did come back and say it's obviously yes. But I
yeah, but
also
maybe
have,
not, because the parking cost of the
Right.
current location could be more,
I
plus
know he said
Rios.
yes, but I don't think he had all of the facts.
Okay, so let's leave that alone.
Yep.
Okay, that was, the only thing I would like to change is on page 3. I know this is very picky. Number 2, middle school class size, they were unsuccessful in getting funding.
That's not,
Could we just put in getting state funding?
Right.
I'm just not to, or,
it's,
is that okay or no? The whole section is a little,
it has more to do with the middle school class, middle school building.
yeah. Yeah, that's true. Can we change, what do I say that?
Which one is,
Number 2, middle school class size. Tim is
Okay.
correct.
I'm getting state funding.
Middle school.
It should be middle school facilities renovation
Yeah.
To reduce class size.
to reduce class size. So do I have to make a motion on that, or?
They're getting state funding. And you
As
want to
amended.
say what kind of
Okay.
state funding you want?
Oh, yeah, what was it, the I just remembered.
MDSA?
M,
MSDA.
MSBA.
MSBA.
Right.
Yeah, Mary, Sam, Boy, Apple.
State.
MSBA.
Thank you.
MSBA.
Okay.
So,
Good.
other than that, any other changes? So we need a motion to amend.
I hereby, oh, go ahead.
I move to amend page 3, item 2, to insert to reduce between school and class size, and to put, insert the word state before the state, paren, MSBA, into paren, funding.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good, thank you. The next part of our meeting has to do with the special town meeting coming up. Officially, we do not have a favorable or unfavorable recommendation for any of the warrants. And the meeting starts at 7 o'clock on Tuesday, January 30th. The most important thing here is as we get together, we will have a meeting at 6:15 in the school, in the high school guidance conference room, which is where the principal section is. So Angela will make sure she finds you. And we'll meet and discuss whatever. We will have a meeting that will continue through the special town meeting. And then don't leave, because then we have to adjourn. So it's part of the official rules for that.
Can I ask about that? What's the purpose of doing that, just to
If-
clarify?
Just to clarify, in case we want to have something that's official, that we want to have recorded, it will be then and there. And then it's just a formality more than anything else.
Right, I know we do it at annual town meeting. just-
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
So you're just saying that that's the plan, we're just going to.
We don't know where the seating arrangement is.
At the present time, I don't. Mark DeSilva has suggested I'll be contacted relative to all the details. I'll just say it that way.
Dress accordingly.
Just accordingly. You could, it's, right now, because it's being held in the field house, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, they don't necessarily have a platform that can fit what they would have in the auditorium. And I'm fine with that. I mean, again, we don't have a dog.
It may not even be on a platform.
We're not
Right,
making
right.
it.
So
They're all
just-
going to be looking down.
It does not matter.
Yeah.
That,
All right, so, all right.
that's,
It's a
it's-
just in case, is what you're saying, basically, yes.
yeah.
It's,
That said, we've collectively, in the last meetings or two, or actually several months, have discussed how the fact that, yeah, we get it, we don't really have a say on rezoning. Bear with me, please. We don't have a say on rezoning, whether we have a favorable or unfavorable recommendation. This situation we're facing in town meeting has business, economics, financial impact that I think does warrant, sorry to use the same word, warrant some attention from us relative to how we believe as a committee, or not, can always end up with a not, believe as a committee about where we're going strategically over the next 5 years and what we think this opportunity may or may not have in helping us meet those goals. I purposely asked town manager and the school superintendent about questions, strategic questions. The big thing that came out of Jen's conversation was we have 23 positions to fill, of which she thinks 3, 4, 5 might be filled over the next couple budget cycles, but if there's still a large pool that's going to be out there. And a lot of that large pool has to do with the middle school, period, facility. We don't have the space for all those teachers. That said, we've all been involved with looking at a writing, drafting, some sort of formal response. And Karen suggested, and I agree, if we can come up with a consensus formal response, it ought to be a document that is there and present. It won't be in the book, but there and present relative to people coming into the building and having a written document before them. Karen, you want to speak to that?
okay,
So,
so, yes, all right, so you have
That
a
would be
written
an
document
objective.
before you, that's the objective, because people can pick it up as they pick up their books. And when they listen to your presentation, they will have a piece of paper that they can refer back to about detail.
I think that's an excellent idea. The structure that I had drafted was structured and redrafted, and I have a handout in case anyone wants, I just want to talk to it.
Can I ask a question?
It's the one you sent us
Before we
today.
even start, if it's okay, before we even start having a discussion about the specifics of how you outlined, if that's okay, could we make a consensus on what our objective of this document is? Because I think that will help us in what we write.
That's fair.
So what is this, I think you termed it
Position paper.
So we all call it the same thing. You know, what is our objective in writing this position paper?
I think that we have to ask ourselves, who do we represent? Who is our client? Why are we here? We are here to advise our fellow citizens and neighbors,
Our residents, yep.
our residents, about things
The fiscal
that-
health of the,
Of the community.
of the
of the
community.
community.
And if you narrow it to that, we are sizing up an opportunity to embrace, to have another revenue stream. It's simply a revenue stream.
Yes.
Do we need the revenue stream? How badly do we need it? Are we dependent on this stream? Over the next 5 years, can we have our operating budget that has been presented for the next 5 years? Will that work without this stream? Will the capital improvement plan work without this stream? As we look from 5 years to 10 years to 15 years, when we're out there 15 years, 20 years, we will probably have not only a new middle school, but a new high school. And when you're looking out there this long, would you need this revenue stream to reduce the amount that you have to bond? We have a whole bunch of bonds that are becoming maturing from the building of the high school now. And it's improving our financial situation because we're laying off that liability. Have we able to turn the clock back, 15 or 20 years ago when this thing was being thought of, the high school building project? And had we an opportunity to have a revenue stream like
A
this?
substantial.
A substantial revenue stream, would we have had to have borrowed as much? Would we be able to retire that debt sooner? So, looking forward to the next block of time, that's my concern. I'm not so much worried about the next 5 years as I am about 5 to 10 to 15. And depending upon the size of the stream, all of these things are being negotiated. We have to make a decision as a town. Is it worth it? Should we do it?
So then our education then, right? It's more of educating the citizens, or do you want certain topics for discussion?
Well,
No, there's no
really,
topics for discussion.
So
This is
is
a
it-
3-minute presentation, Divya.
I mean, these folks are going to be sitting there voting yes or no, and they have to have some frame
So
of
I
reference.
think, I think you're exactly right. So, and so in reading kind of what Tim presented and the things that we've gone back and forth, we've discussed essentially, I think it is completely appropriate and very important for us to outline where we think we stand today, and then where we think there may be opportunities or issues going forward, in terms of what we know. The facts that we know are things that we think are highly probable. And that's where I would like to stick to, I guess, what we know for sure.
So let me just sort of recast a couple things here. I want to go back to what Karen said first. Karen, yes, I believe the Finance Committee has an obligation to the citizens of the town to say something, and that, to me, there's no doubt about it. I also like the fact that you're looking out 5 to 10 years, because I too truly believe we could limp along, and that's my words, over the next 5 years, steady state. You won't be able to achieve during that period of time some of these goals that the school department have, some of the liabilities that we have out there, regardless of the fact that we could turn over some of the debt. And we could be a little more comfortable. Look at, one of the things that we started talking about in my position paper here, which we'll talk about in a second, had to do with, geez, this is how we could spend money. I personally didn't want to get into that. It's very possible that, yeah, it could be spent for school, but it's also very possible that it could be spent to reduce, could be used to reduce
OPED.
OPED. It could be used to reduce our taxes. It could be done any way that the town feels is the best and the most appropriate way, and they'll do that independent of what we say here. But,
Absolutely.
but, you know, it's like we do need to take a position, I believe, on what's happening at special town meeting and how we say it.
Yeah, but how do you say our position is that you should strongly consider this additional substantial revenue source without sharing what could be lost opportunity if that's not taken advantage of? I mean, I guess at some point we still have to say there's OPED, there's school needs, there's town facility needs, there's senior, I mean, do we avoid listing those items?
No, I don't think that you even, that you ultimately take a position on the articles that are being presented. I think you lay out the facts. Here's where we stand today. Based on our knowledge and in-depth conversations with town officials, we think that there may be issues going forward in these areas. And we believe that will require additional revenue sources or decrease in expenses in other areas over the next X amount of years. And we would like you to consider that when voting during special town meeting.
Yeah, so our
And
critical
stop.
examination of the entire thing and then presenting before the.
And then you're basically providing people with the opportunity to have facts about our town, to have a consensus as a committee about where we think we need to focus on going forward in the near and long term, or midterm, whatever. And then,
So facts such as,
like, basically allow people to feel comfortable with what they're voting on.
So you
either way.
don't want
Does that
to
make
have-
sense?
Well, yeah, but I don't think it's a matter of giving them comfort, because there's a morality issue here that
We're not even getting into.
that
or
we're not
it's
even getting
it's not
anywhere
like
near
a
that. So I wouldn't use the word comfortable. I think
maybe that's the wrong word, but feeling comfortable with the data because they'll have it with them.
right.
enough,
I mean,
an
I-
educated opinion.
Yeah, I think what we can say to some degree is that by no means are the potential costs we see moving forward exhaustive, but just as way of example,
Right.
we need 23 new teachers to bring our average class size down. We know that. That's a fact. You know, the numbers don't lie. We need 23 students.
Facility
Or 23
build-outs,
teachers. We
facility
need a
build
new
out,
middle school, you
Yes.
know, or to accommodate. We can't even hire 14 of those without a new middle
renovated
school.
middle school.
We have OPEB, which,
Yeah, curriculum.
you know, and again, I don't think we should even pretend to say this. Even this revenue stream isn't going to touch OPEB.
No.
You know, but we can say we have this lingering OPEB concern that at some point we may have to at least put some more aside
Yes,
for them we're
increase our
already
reserves
currently doing, right?
for it.
You know,
Okay.
so I think we can list some very specific things saying that this is not exhaustive, nor are we saying that any revenue that comes from this project
solve.
necessarily has to go to these things.
going to be
But
spent
what
this
we
way.
can tell you is that somebody's going to have to show us the money, because it's not there to do what we want to do going forward. If you talk to our town leaders and you look at the consensus budgets that they've put through for the last 5 years, and the town meeting has voted on, and this is where we want to go as a town, we can't keep driving in that direction without something changing. Will this be the changing thing? We really can't tell them that either.
No.
We don't know how much is going to come from this. We don't know
Yes.
if we're going to be able to actually get the type of host agreement that Andrew described last night.
absolutely.
That's completely up in the air.
No.
I mean, if it ends up being under the Cannabis Control Commission rules instead of under the Department of Public Health rules, that thing goes out the window. That $5 million goes out the window, the way I heard that meeting. So we can't even tell people that this is going to be a particular, but we have to say, we need more revenue.
That's right.
That's my point. I think we're saying the same thing, maybe just in a
Right.
different way. This isn't a project, to me at least, a project-focused statement. This is what we know as a finance committee, and we hope that it allows people to understand a little
Make a
bit
more
better
educated
about what's going on in our
decision.
community, and that may help them with their vote
Right.
either
And
way.
why this vote could potentially be
So they
so.
don't come back and say they weren't educated.
Can she write that down?
I know, I should have written
No,
it.
I don't think I can.
It's recorded.
It's on the tape.
In context, in context, when we began this budget year as a committee, we actually did break out into sections what we wanted to talk about. And one of the very first things we talked about was the gap, at least on the school side of things, and then them achieving their strategic goal. we were going to quantify, and I still hope we can quantify
For the
in
final
our,
town meeting.
in our town meeting letter, that there's this gap. And, basically, there's this gap.
Right.
So that's really what we're trying to achieve right now in the special town meeting, is there's
But in a
a
slightly less
Can we,
specific way.
numeric way.
Because right now,
Can we
we're
do it
budgeting
in
Right,
all
right,
this-
right.
We don't have all the numbers that.
Right.
So with that in mind, you know, even though I've redrafted this thing many
I can pull
times,
it up.
Do you have a hard copy? I, for some reason, don't have one.
It's okay, this is all happened in the last 24
we,
hours.
we are going to, this is a real hard, this is a working draft.
Is this the one you emailed?
This
Can
is
I-
the one email,
I-
and then
Put it
Yeah,
up
I've got
there
it.
so I
You may put it up.
three other.
But the way I structured this, folks, was real simple. And I have my doubts about it, because I do like what the team here is going for. I basically said, well, let's do our due diligence and say that the business plan is sound. I don't know. I mean,
We
we had
can't say
Chuck,
that.
we had
can't say
Chuck
that.
go in there, and Chuck, I would trust with my portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
And he came back and said, very financially strong, and it's been solid, he's said that many times. But I don't think any one of you have seen the
I haven't seen
financials, the balance sheets.
No.
No,
So
I
I can't
haven't,
say
but
that.
I would put my faith in his assessment.
I agree, but
I mean, he's
it's,
a
Yeah, but are we
professional, for
stating
heaven's
that
sake.
in our opinion letter?
Yeah,
Is it
it's hard for us
necessary
to-
to state
Well,
that?
No.
It's
If
hard
I-
for us.
I don't feel comfortable with that, quite frankly.
but I think the overall push and position here is that here is a very good potential revenue source that would address those things, and I wish we had captured.
Yeah, and can I also point out, though, that in all honesty, I'm not sure that anybody at town meeting is really questioning whether Massachusetts Innovation Works has the financial wherewithal.
No,
I don't think
they're
that's even an issue
No.
with a lot of people that are considering this.
Good point.
It was an issue with us because we're finance, you know,
Yeah.
Chuck's a finance guy and he raised the issue and
Mm-hmm.
he resolved the issue to his liking, you know, and he feels comfortable with it. But in all honesty,
That's not the
again,
issue.
that kind of falls into the same category as, gee, this host agreement may not really end up being that. Well, this investor may not end up being that. We're not making
others.
any guarantees about that. What we're saying is, as a finance committee, we can tell you with very strong assurance that we do not have right now on the horizon any new sources of revenue that are going to be sufficient to sustain the plans and the strategic goals of the schools and the town.
Are you trying to scare them? What if it fails? It will create a sense of scare amongst the citizens.
You mean like we have financial trouble?
No,
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
I,
I
You know,
mean,
we
if-
made plans that we can't, we can't pay for.
we have to be very
can't pay
careful
for
about-
them. We can borrow for them. We're just trying to reduce the amount that
well, we
have
can't
to
borrow for new teachers. We can't borrow for new teachers. We can borrow for new buildings and that kind of stuff, but we cannot borrow for new people.
Well,
You
so
know, so
you-
there are certain things that we can't borrow for.
So you just don't keep
You know,
the
I'm not
buildings
saying
up.
we have to scare people, but I don't mean it to come across that way, but what I mean to say is that,
It would maybe expedite the whole process and
Is it, you know, as I said earlier, next 5 years, current revenue stream is sufficient to do status quo. It is insufficient
to build a new middle school.
to
Even
build-
if we got the
It
funding,
is insufficient to
probably.
achieve our objectives and goals, and I told somebody, I said, it's almost like a moral obligation to our town employees, retirees, because, you know, the whole country's put their head in the sand relative to how do we deal with this. And I like to think that we can deal with it by having some other revenue stream. That's all.
so do you have a guarantee of how much revenue are we going to get?
No,
No.
and I don't think
So-
we are going to get
No,
into
no, I'm just
that.
asking.
Oh, last night it was quoted that this is done on a quarterly basis, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah, 80
But-
quarters.
80 quarters, 1.125 million per quarter, which is equivalent to, if I saw right,
5 million a year.
5 million a year over 20, or 10 years, 20 years?
20 years.
20 years.
20
Thank
years.
you. It's $100 million.
That's what they're negotiating right now under the host
And
agreement.
that's just the, I'll call the host piece, you can call it whatever. In addition to that, the discussion, Dr. Goldstein made a comment that he's committed to putting up to $1 million a year into a foundation for the town, to support the town. And in addition to that, you have the underlying property values, property taxes, permit, all those other things, ancillary things, that will increase. A lot of the unknowns, we could speculate, no economics voodoo. The speculation is that you bring in, becoming the state-of-the-art center for this kind of industry, and you're gonna bring in a lot of new entrepreneurs, you bring in new innovations, you've got some, all of a sudden, this becomes the town to be. So
Collateral development.
Yeah, so what you've
As
done
opposed
is,
to collateral
you've done is
damage.
you've improved your school system, you've improved the town community overall and its businesses, and who benefits? I would say that
Property owners.
the property owners would benefit for something like that. Now, I'm not guaranteeing that. Who knows? But by the same token, you always should take a chance on anything. But we're not gonna advocate that. We're just gonna basically say, guys, here are the goals, here's the thing, what we have to address sometime. We need additional revenue stream.
Okay.
We need economic
So,
development.
I
mean, if
would
you
like
wanna
her to keep it to
Bower
be a
down to
very
a
simple
sentence.
statement, though. I keep finding as we're redoing and revising this letter, that it is long, it is confusing, it's not in layman's terms, and I'm wondering that if we could get that message, could we keep it that short?
I think so.
I mean,
There's a big difference, let me point out, between the written word and the spoken word. And what you're trying to do here
oh,
is make a oral presentation that reads well. That's hard.
and it's
If you take
substantial.
a very detailed written, it doesn't come out well orally.
Yeah.
I think that what you have put together in this draft is probably a pretty good compromise between the two.
Yeah, but we're gonna cut out some pieces.
I think it needs to be cut in half.
Yeah, short and sweet.
in
I
half.
almost think that the items that we would like to pay attention to, and I'm a bullet point person, I know that,
Yeah,
need to
I
be
was
bullet
thinking bullet
pointed.
points as well.
I'm just,
So, when I was looking at this yesterday, because it was easier for me to organize my own head, I wrote my own. So, and not in an offensive way, it's how I organize myself. So, when thinking about this, and I'm not saying that I propose we do this, it's just to start discussion. It was more, we are presenting these our statement, one sentence, maybe two. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're writing about. So, do you want to try
No,
this as
no,
we talk
I'm
about
not
it?
doing that. Okay? Excuse me.
no, go ahead.
Okay. We're going to be here until midnight on this.
She's been through the letter
Okay.
writing before.
Mm-hmm.
I also did my own.
Okay.
She did.
No, I didn't do my own. I just have
You-
comments.
You have your comments here,
Okay.
on here. I'm not really comfortable with sitting here and going through this process right now.
Then what would you? My understanding was that we wanted to leave today with a final draft. So you tell me
Yeah,
what
we
the
do.
most effective way to do that is.
Well, I think it's to take a look at Tim's draft and use it.
Absolutely.
So-
It was just to so that we could go on his draft and talk about the first sentence.
So can I
the
suggest
first
something?
section?
Like
Let
we
me,
did
let,
last time.
Right,
let me suggest something, folks. Writing a letter by committee is death by 1,000 paper cuts.
You bet it is.
And my suggestion is the following. What I was told was I need to provide something by tomorrow, at least a placeholder, so that the information can be provided to town meeting. So my suggestion is the following. We put together, in short time, basically in outline format, what Liz, yourself, and Sasha have spoken to. Give me 5 bullets. I will draft something. I will put it out in the public domain for everyone to read. And
You're still not
and
comfortable.
I would be happier if we got this done tonight and we have Liz do the writing.
Wait a minute. How is that concurrent? First of all, listen, why can't we do it tonight and be done with it and not have Liz do?
No, we'll do it tonight, and Liz edits it.
But
Liz has done a fantastic job of working
But why
with
can't we
this
just edit
group.
it now on the fly
Yes,
So we're doing it.
with a cutoff
and
time?
Liz basically organizes it.
So,
Liz doesn't.
so
I guess so.
Always
I
get
just,
stuck with it.
can I stop for a second?
no good deed goes unpunished.
So, all right.
I just want that on
So-
the record.
I want you to know that in the past, when we have been doing our reports over these last 6 years, this woman has added so much organizationally and word-wise to the products that we've been working on that I really, in this pressive time right now, feel much better
So
if she does this.
I'll take this one step further, and we'll cut off the conversation and work on it. Liz, you get a laptop here?
I do.
So Liz, I need you to start crafting what you said, and if you want, we can hook your laptop into the monitor.
Oh, hold on. Are those renovations? Good job.
So I thought,
Are those changes on your piece of paper, Liz, on this latest version that
right.
Tim sent to us today?
These notes I have?
Yeah.
No. No, that was just, what I said was just sort of like
We're not
the
talking.
process of me just sort of churning this over the last hour and a half and
Yes.
So
thinking
people who
about
have
it.
the draft in their hands, just so you know, what we're talking about primarily is taking out the third paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
We have studied is being removed and replaced maybe with a single sentence.
Yeah.
And it'll be replaced by a single sentence after we talk about, and I do believe North Andover finances are currently on solid footing as evidence, is a good starting paragraph into this thing. And then it basically begins with that, and it goes into,
Do I have the latest one?
I mailed it out.
Yeah.
So my suggestion is this. As far as I'm concerned, just delete it.
Delete that whole
Just
paragraph.
delete that whole
Yeah.
paragraph. Liz,
We have
drive
studied.
me there.
Yeah, we have studied.
Okay.
Gone.
Do we want to get into this
I would like to.
where
remove
we
half.
talked about, we've never had a dog in the fight before?
No.
No.
Wait. What do you mean?
But I do think so.
No.
Explaining
You
why
know-
we don't comment on zoning.
Well, the business about that first sentence, as you know, the North.
Yeah, nobody
Andover-
knows this, but.
Nobody knows that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? I would like to see something legal, a law case, a statute, a regulation, a rule that says that finance committees cannot,
But that was just determined by our own town.
okay. That was determined by just our own policy. That's a policy.
No, we were not asked
Okay.
to give a favorable or unfavorable
Yes.
recommendation.
Yes.
We were not asked. Who would normally ask us
Well,
that?
that would be
The
our
moderator
duty.
or
That
the
would- That
selectman?
would be
So
our
why
duty.
can't
Our
we-
duty. Okay,
Why
so
can't
we are
remove
not,
all that? We are obligated to address the economic and financial rewards and risks associated with this. Done.
I didn't
Do we
realize
have
we
to
were
explain
calling
what we're-
out Mass Innovation Works at all.
Wasn't that the whole meeting? Oh, right.
I think what Liz was talking about was,
With the warrants before you.
but not all the warrants are directly related to Mass. Well, I mean, they're related, but they're not
I don't think
specific
we-
to the
Right.
What
petitioner.
he's saying is, wait a minute, with the
Warrants
warrants
before you.
for you.
And I think that's broad enough. You don't need to get into article, more.
Agreed.
So that's fine. Because they all have the same thing.
okay, so you're doing these on the fly up there?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm saying, why can't we get rid of everything in blue?
Why?
Under the circumstance, we are obligated to address the economic and financial rewards. Do we
No.
need to explain that we don't comment on zoning?
No,
we
but
need-
you could take out the first sentence and the rest of it.
Hey, just, take out the first sentence, as you know.
Okay.
And are we actually, we're not actually commenting on the economics and financial rewards and risks associated with the warrant articles at all. We're commenting on the current financial position and future financial outlook of the town, right?
Yes.
So that's not the right sentence either. So I would say something like, and change it, but it's our obligation to provide citizens with the committee's view on both the something about the current financial position and future financial outlook of the town.
Yeah, I like that.
I missed one word. Hold on.
And not say, yeah.
Thank you. Period. Period.
Yeah.
Are we,
Do we need all this before?
are we saying under the circumstances, or just, we believe it's our
As-
obligation,
yeah.
we believe it is our obligation?
As the town finance committee, we are charged with addressing the current and future financial outlook of the town.
Great.
Thank you.
Right? Does that work?
Great.
Yes.
You're still getting your grades there.
With addressing, there you go, the current and future financial outlook of the town. Yeah, I don't know that we need to say this departure from this tradition stuff,
Yeah.
because there is no tradition when it comes to stuff like this. I
That's
mean, when
right.
has something like this ever come up?
Okay.
I would delete that.
So I'd take out the whole thing about tradition,
Take it out.
yeah.
That's what I'm, thank you.
Then let's move down to this, no, keep this paragraph. I think that's ought to be, I want to give the assurances to the
Solid
citizens.
footing.
And I want to give
Yeah.
assurances to the citizens. of
Yeah, we
where
don't
it's-
wanna scare them, as
Right.
did you, yeah,
So what do we want,
cause
what do
there's
we want
nothing to be
to
scared about.
address? So some of the things I know other people and, like, do we want to just address AAA bond rating? Do we all want to
This
address?
seems to be a consensus for many of the people.
Okay.
Yeah.
But because of this, the finance sees significant shortcomings to attain its strategic educational goals to address the significant obligation to town retirees. You guys.
I don't like the because of this. It's something, under the current state, we project revenue at 2.9, okay?
Yeah, and there's,
Because of this 2.9%
It's not-
annualized growth.
I don't
But
even
again,
say that. I think it's here's where we are today and stop. That's the paragraph. And then here's in the future what we see.
Can't we just say the 2.9% growth, like get rid of the blue?
Which is what
Yes.
you did, but when
Yes.
I'm trying to be
Yes.
really
Just get rid of
specific
the
about
blue.
it,
Get rid of
right?
the blue.
Okay,
But
now.
Wait, go back,
Wait,
put that,
okay.
just back up for a second, just hit
Yeah,
on
yeah,
you.
absolutely.
Because of this shortcoming.
I do like
Just look at the
transitions.
next paragraph too when
You
you
like
read
transitions?
it.
Yeah.
I like
It's not
transitions.
adequate to address.
I know you do.
Okay,
It connects the dots.
all right.
Right.
Thank you.
But I think Tim also said that 2.9 growth is, that's based on Andrew's 5-year forecast. That is a grim number. And there
It's
is new,
inflation.
yeah. I mean, we get new growth, we
I'd like to
have,
say the revenue would grow 2.9, but expenses might grow at a higher rate than
Right,
that, so.
right.
Come on.
So- So one of the ways, I don't know if we want to include this, but one of the ways to kind of say this is to, like, in that paragraph about AAA bond rating, is to say, one positive thing too is that we've reached a consensus budget because they're prioritizing
But nobody
essential.
knows what that means.
But wait for a sec. And we can say it different, that's fine.
Okay.
But so we're reaching a consensus budget, so basically they're prioritizing our essential needs first and being able to achieve those essential needs based on where we are today. But we see that the community has desires above and beyond those essential needs, greater needs, however you want to say it, and that's like the transition. So
Yeah.
people feel comfortable with where we stand today. We're not going to not be able to pay our liabilities, but if you want more than what we're getting today, more than these essential needs, or you can choose a different word, we
level
need to.
funding
Wha-
is basically,
I was trying to
level
make it so
services.
people didn't.
Can
I didn't know
Hold
if
on a
people knew
second.
what that meant.
Sasha?
Yeah.
Just for a second. We have people who've come and are starting to lead, and we can take a pause in this because you know the direction we're going in. I think we've stated it 5 different ways, but they all come back the same way. Is there any public comment that you would like to make relative to what you've heard today? Because I want to give that opportunity to you, and I don't want you to be delayed because, as I said, this can be a painful process. I was kidding around, by the way. Thank you for attending. I so appreciate it. There is some good times going on in our town. It's interesting times. I won't say right or wrong, but I can just say that it makes things exciting. So, any comment at all, folks?
Any comments?
No?
I would just say, I think that you are doing a great job because, as a member of the public, I would want to hear from you. And it's funny, I use those exact words your second sentence is that the finance committee is charged with overseeing this, and so, you know, and part of what you do is you meet with every different entity in this town and figure out, you know, where improvements need to be made, and this is what you do. And so from your perspective, things are okay and will be status quo going forward, or we could make the improvements that are so needed in certain areas.
That's the word you're
with
looking for.
another source-
Status quo.
Status quo.
She just said it. With another source of
You just said
revenue.
it. It's not essential, it's something else. Thank you.
With another source of revenue.
Would you like to pull up a
As we've said, no good deed goes unpunished. For the record, you need to give us your name.
Name and address, please.
Yeah, just.
I know her name and her address.
That's right, you have to state it. Just state it.
Sure, it's Kim Cooperstein. I'm actually an attorney. Attorney Kim Cooperstein.
if you can put your address, so I can quote you.
I do a lot of writing every day. And it's 133 Colonial Ave. But you were right. You used the exact words I said to my husband a second before, that we are charged with. Lay it out there. And so people realize your expertise right offhand, and what your point is, just to give them a picture of the situation financially in the town.
Thank you.
And I think that you're definitely on the right track.
Yeah, thank you as well. I know, I think the project, everyone assumed that it was just the planning board and the board of selectmen, but it's gone much deeper than that, as you can see. You're here at, 5 minutes to 9, trying to carve out this letter that's properly written, very specific, very detailed, thorough, and not too lengthy, of course, so we all appreciate that.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's all her fault.
Any other public comments? You're more than welcome to stay through the paper cuts, but, okay. Let's move on.
I'm adding it in just for a second. I have no idea how to.
I would say, we could say
Okay.
something about, you can use consensus budget, you can say level, to have level services. I mean, whatever word you want to use. You've been charged with wordsmithing this, so go for it if you take a stab at it. But you get the potential transition point, I guess.
Yeah.
Can I offer this idea? Because of this low revenue growth rate,
I don't like it. Chris?
and get rid
And
of the word education.
I wouldn't say shortcomings
I
either.
like this sentence here, going after this, 5 years.
Okay, oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Do it again?
I like that first sentence. North Andover's finances.
Yeah,
we
that's
could
great.
say, this is our opinion. The current
Yep.
North Andover's finances are currently on solid footing, as evidenced by our AAA bond rating, our reserve fund policies and actual reserves, and prudent fiscal management. And I think we want to say something along the lines of the prudent fiscal management by
Our
the
government
town manager, just make it clear that we're overseeing a process of prudent fiscal management. You see what I mean?
I wouldn't
By our
list
town,
them all. I would just say our government officials or something.
yeah, that's it, by government officials, by our government officials. And employees,
I also.
because Andrew's an employee. He's not an official, right? Yeah.
That's right. I also believe this to be a true statement, is a fact. But I like to have this, the 2.9% growth allows the town to remain status quo. Coming right after 5 years. Why? Because then you have to,
Yes.
then you enter into, but our plans are not status quo.
Right.
And I'm not using the exact
Yeah.
words.
Yeah.
That's a
No, I
transition
like that.
sentence?
I like that.
Is that a
That's
nice
good.
transition?
Yeah,
But our plans are not status quo. How's that sound?
right. And we need to say something not
That's
under
not-
the current state. State's confusing.
Yeah. Hold on. Under the current,
Currently, the town
Currently.
projects revenue
thank you.
to grow 2.9% on an annualized basis over the next 5 years. This 2.9% growth, allows the town to remain, and again, we need a better,
Not
we've
to remain
that a little bit,
status
but,
quo.
To provide
Stable service.
state,
Right.
to
to maintain.
To maintain.
status quo.
It's not proactivity,
Yeah.
it's not improvement.
Allows
I-
the town to maintain
No.
the status quo in terms of services.
But they've made so much progress, I feel like we're discrediting some of the progress
Yeah,
made
that's
in the
good.
last couple of years.
That's fair. That's fair.
I
Okay.
think, you know, to say something like, I'm trying to.
But that is the status quo, though. The status,
And-
the status quo is a little bit
The
of
same.
good things.
But-
Same, yeah.
I guess I don't want
Fire station
to.
opens up,
But I
Right.
don't want to
You know,
discredit that
staying
specifically. I
with
think
the times.
What are the words
Kindergarten
that Andrew
building
uses
and-
about stewardship, and he has some very good
Sustainability.
words. Sustainability and that is the mantra of Andrew and his group, and I think that we've all believe very strongly in that. So I think we have to say something. This 2.9%, along with
with some improvements. The
how
status
about-
quo with some improvements, with some capital improvements.
the 2.9% growth allows the town to
I don't know if I have this.
to manage resources in a way that can be both something about managing resources that can be maintained over the long term and prioritizing our most.
Come on.
I'm saying essential again. I don't know the right word. I need to
Maintain services with some capital improvements.
with incremental improvements.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, incremental.
with incremental, that's, I like that.
incremental is a good finance
Let's give them
term.
hope.
Do we get rid of the word some?
Come on, Liz.
Yes.
I'm working on it. I don't.
Putting too much pressure on her.
Everybody, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it is.
This stuff just kind of
incremental.
flies out of
Do
my
you
head,
wanna-
and then I have to get it back out again.
I don't think
Do you
the
have
word is
something at
because,
10
I
o'clock
think
again?
however.
Status quo
Do I have to
implies
follow you home?
no
Because.
change. We have it incremental improvements. They're bonded, it's not like we're paying cash for them.
Right, right.
They're incremental improvements.
Or, no, we were gonna change this last sentence anyways.
Because of this revenue growth rate.
Or,
The transition words are, yeah.
I think the real simple, however, the 2.9%, I'm gonna just again throw out ideas.
Will not
Okay,
sustain the
we're-
following
we're-
goals.
However,
bullet,
the
bullet.
2.9% will not achieve,
Will not allow the town
to achieve its
to
stated,
achieve
its stated goals,
its stated goals,
strategic goals.
including but not limited to some
Well,
bullet points.
I was
We
gonna
need
say-
some bullet
Yes.
points. Including but not limited to the following. Increase
Sure
in
you wanna-
teachers,
you
you
wanna-
know, to get class
Yeah, that's
sizes
good.
down, however we wordsmith that. Reduce class sizes to goal of, is that, actually, that goal is different at different age
Yeah,
levels.
it is.
So
It's
why
right
don't we
here. I got
say
it right
something like
here.
consistent with state, you know.
Consistent with the school committee's strategic goals
Yeah,
or directives.
state-
what do they call
or
it?
state
To-
benchmarks, whatever it
But
is.
we're not
Yeah.
using the state ones. We're
State
using,
benchmarks.
but we're
Are we
not
using the
using
state?
No,
Oh, okay.
it's school committee budget directives. Is what
Okay.
it's called.
Okay,
Well,
Yep.
parents gonna know what budget directives are?
But that's what I mean. I think so because they
Yeah.
pass it. It's on like all the NAPS websites called that.
yeah.
It's right here, I got it right on, I got the piece of paper. Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Yeah.
Which, okay.
So I think so. If they're at a special town
reduce
meeting, they
class.
probably look
Yeah,
at those.
class
Okay.
size, reduce class size, mass school
So they're
committee
gonna-
directives.
Okay.
What was the
Increase
next one?
Reserve
So we
funding for
actually-
OPED?
Actually, if you look down here, by the way, there are sentences like reduce class size.
Yeah, let's
I
go
think
down
we
to
should
there.
also
Our
talk
bullet
about
points are already there.
timing and availability of funding. So it's not it's not will we get there someday?
It's
It's
when.
when. And that was a big,
Will not allow the town to achieve its strategic goals.
Senior center.
He's
yeah.
right. Wait a minute, that's the whole point. We can reduce class sizes, it's a question of when.
So it's really
In
the
the
timing
directive,
and
it never
availability of
says right
funding.
here. Hold on.
It does. Reduce the percentage of classes K through 5 that exceed those guidelines to 15% FY19. And then I think somewhere else it says,
Oh, gee,
But
that's too much.
yes.
That's too broad. The
What,
bullet
reducing
point
class
one
sizes?
is too broad, because you can reduce, as you said, class sizes over the next 5 years. That's doable.
Within an acceptable timing, something about it being acceptable to the community in terms of timing and availability of funding. Like,
Within the
It's
next,
the
How?
time. It's
What do
the,
you-
it's the 10 to 15 year period,
Yeah.
over the long term.
Okay,
we are
so-
concerned about.
If they don't know, if the average voter doesn't know how overcrowded, I mean, it's
That's why I said,
quite an eye opener looking at
use
how
this sentence here,
how big
reduce
our
class
classes
size
are.
to best practice levels. and then continue. I think that's your bullet right there.
Okay, hold
The
on a second.
19th, yeah.
I said-
Yeah.
Redu-
You gotta
Just
give
start over with
background.
reduce here,
Yeah,
reduce right here,
Yeah,
yeah,
right there.
and just
Yeah.
cut all that all the way down to here.
yeah, all the way down to
Even here.
406 school districts.
I think we now stop, well, hey, yeah,
Whoa,
put them both.
No, I think we could do a separate bullet point for
Yeah,
the
but
middle
bring them
school.
back, bring them both
Yeah.
up, bring them both up.
Okay, I see what you mean, yeah.
Okay, so this here, and then make it into 2 bullet points.
Right.
And do we take out elementary classroom renovations, or,
No, it's
No, because
just,
we still
because
have
we
all
wanna
those-
see those in the master plan,
Yeah.
and it's timing. So
Yeah.
really, it's,
It's overall classroom
I think you should
size.
take out the elementary.
I
Reduce
just think
overall
it's, I
classroom
think because
size.
they're gonna be really pushing the
Because of
focus
the
on
K.
on the middle school.
It's
So-
pushing on the middle school, that's the longer range
Right.
project.
Yeah,
And
that
the
is the
high school
longer.
beyond it.
Yeah, you're right,
I mean,
you're
in
right.
the, in the short haul, we're
Yeah.
pretty okay. As we start going to middle school and high school, we're not okay.
Well, and also it's interesting, and why I asked this question, I know the information's in this packet from
Yeah.
the superintendent, but just because these are the school committee's budget directives, doesn't mean that they are in line with where the rest of the state is. They're still
I'm just
above,
guessing.
right, the average state
Oh, no.
sizes.
No,
That was my question.
no.
The class, yes.
What?
Yes.
Say
Class
that.
sizes are above the state average in many cases.
Yeah.
Above the state average in
Yes.
many cases.
Correct.
In most cases,
In most cases?
virtually all cases.
Yes.
High school maybe
No, I just,
not. Middle school and elementary.
It's in the back page of this.
Oh,
yeah, I was
oh,
reading that
okay,
earlier. It was-
elementary school
Which is
And the-
right?
and middle school,
Especially those.
but the
The
high
most
school is a
important
different
grades.
story.
the most important
No,
grades.
no, so so in this, Karen, this will help you.
Deserve a lot
Yes.
of credit for the
Oh, yeah, okay.
No, this will help you.
resource challenges. Whenever it gets factored into some of the ratings.
We currently rank 19th,
It's too many words, I know. Is that what you're trying to do, is capture all the different best practice, state,
No,
directive?
Not there, do you think?
I don't think you need to talk.
I think I think the North Andover School Committee is all we need to say. That's who's driving the bus here. You know, they've said they want to meet these goals. That's all. If they want to meet them, there's not enough money to do it in the short term, in the 5-year term.
I would just say to level stated.
Yeah, we're selling a little bit here, ranking the 19th
Yeah.
largest, that you're making a statement. I think, reduce classroom sizes as an objective.
There's nothing
Well, I
wrong,
don't-
there's
yeah.
nothing, there's nothing wrong with keeping.
I don't mind putting the 19th largest. I mean,
you
that's
could put-
a
you could-
fact.
You could put that in parenthetic if
fact.
you want.
Yeah, it is, but it's not balanced with, we're not explaining everything else to that level of detail.
Well, I think,
There you go.
I mean, you can
where
also.
are we gonna get to OPEB?
Yeah, I need to get to OPEB,
Well,
guys.
what
do
else
you
are
want
we
to
gonna-
talk about the rankings, or do you also want to talk about dollars spent? So we can also say in the proposed FY19.
No,
No, I
no.
don't think we want to go that
I just think
specific.
It's the laundry list of things that could be paid for
Yeah,
with a revenue stream. We're not saying that we should use it for the schools, we're saying that OPEB, it could be,
These are things beyond level funding.
Right, but I guess what I was going to go with is like the percentage, so that 3.65, right? The percentage that is level services versus any kind of new initiative is so small.
Slim. Yeah.
And that's really startling to me. Like the first time I joined FinCom and we had that conversation, I was like, what? That's how much it costs just to
Can you
do what you're doing
Just to keep
today.
the lights on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you write that?
tell me what to write, guys.
I'm working on it.
Here, I have the facts and then you can wordsmith
All
it.
right.
So in the proposed FY 2019 school operating budget, the increase in funding from this year to next is 3.65%, with 2.81% of that accounting for the simple cost of providing level services.
Cost for running.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
need to say simple. I think I was writing it thinking I was speaking as I was writing. Yeah. So you can make that into an appropriate bullet.
I thought the way it came out of your mouth was really good.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a. But what are we?
Guys,
So,
We don't have a specific bullet point here, though, for this. You know, I mean, that's a fact, but what does it go against in terms of what's not going to get accomplished. You're giving a background fact.
I think
is
it
people don't
goes
get any
back
of
to
this.
the judiciousness of having to allocate funds every year because of our limited.
Yeah, but we need to
revenue,
be
right?
judicious every year, no matter what.
Right, so not, but
I
you get
don't
my
know-
point.
yeah.
So how do we appropriately say that and then?
You want those bullet points such that,
This is confusing too, when you do a 3.65, but the paragraph before is 2.9.
Yeah, 3.65
That puts
is,
us in the
and-
red.
and that's
Anybody who
not
could
a
do simple
strategic
math.
goal. What we have above here with the bullet points, we say, however, the 2.9%
grows
will
less
not
than
allow the town to
expenses.
achieve its strategic goals.
I don't think we use the 2.9% in that paragraph.
Why?
I think because
Why?
yeah,
We're
So-
emphasizing that it's
It's
okay.
low.
because it will not if you're I think if you're going to use other data points, it gets a little bit confusing. Maybe we just have to clarify
I
it.
think you gotta take that out.
Yeah,
I
I think this
agree.
all
Just take
goes
it out.
up.
I think
Yeah.
it
Just take it out.
I just.
Well, doesn't this all go?
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Wait,
Doesn't
well,
this
wait,
all go?
wait.
Well, you've stated it above, so yeah, pretty much.
Well, you put the OPEB up top, right? You got it up in the, you got a placeholder for
I
the
do.
OPEB. Okay, yeah.
And then
I mean,
the
I think
senior
our
center.
key is, what we're trying to focus on is what we can say
Well,
right
that's
now is
already
we
built
know
in.
that the
It's
town
already
has some
in.
strategic goals. Right? We know they have some strategic goals, and those are very, and
And here are some
we
of
don't
them.
have to list them all.
No.
We can just list a few of them and say, this is including but not limited to these things. There's lots of others, like the problem with the fact that we have to juggle budgets every year because
The only
we have
reason with
such-
excluding senior centers, I think it's already built in for FY19,
That's baked in.
right?
So in the future, what else do we have?
Well, I
What
think that's
other
what we were
things
just,
could
that's
the
what,
town
that's what
want?
Liz, that's what Liz was just saying is,
Yeah.
these are just examples.
These are examples. We don't even know what they're gonna be.
Yeah, but we don't want
They're-
any
you know,
one group to get upset that we didn't think future about
So
them.
these,
That's
I think the
all.
next sentence here, after
Yeah.
the first word, these are examples of,
Some of the examples
these are some of the examples
of town goal.
of
Um,
future cost. I'm just throwing out words here,
They
guys.
cannot be sustained,
With 2.9% growth?
Well, I think we
They're-
should.
current revenue models, or,
There you
you
go.
know.
Out of the current revenue stream.
Difficult to sustain, right?
I don't think
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
Well, without borrowing.
Yeah,
Well,
we-
that's
again,
not-
we can't
so
borrow
this
for
is also
some of this
not-
stuff.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
we
right.
can't borrow for all of
Right,
it.
you know, you
Yeah.
can't.
That's well. That's not. Can they? Those could all be
No,
done,
no,
but
no,
it's
no,
just
no,
over
cannot.
what period of time and how, right? So I don't think it's that they
No, 2.1.
can't be. It's that we have to think about.
Stream.
You can have the people, but not the bricks and mortar.
Stream.
These are some examples of future,
I don't think the word sustained
I
is
think
right,
we're-
guys.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
no. it's not.
Maintained?
That cannot be
No, because they don't exist.
funded.
Funded.
Cannot be funded.
These are examples
funded.
of strategic goals.
The future
We
cost
certainly
of
can grab as
strategic
much
goals.
debt as we
Yes.
It's the
These
future
are
costs.
these are some of the
of-
examples of yes, future cost of strategic goals.
Yeah,
Of strategic goals that may,
or we could say of costly strategic goals.
Can we say something?
We
here?
don't really know what the costs are
Can we
yet,
say
we don't have them
is black and
quantified.
white, set, black and white, that we will struggle,
Will be challenged.
we
Yeah.
will be challenged.
thank you.
To me,
I like
We
that.
never
It
struggle.
comes out of
We're
the
challenged.
mouth, you know, they'll
Yeah.
be challenged.
we are challenged to be meet with our current personal and commercial tax base.
There you go.
Yes.
Hold on, say it again.
We will be challenged to meet with our current personal and commercial tax base.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
Then just go to in
Love it.
conclusion.
yeah.
And then, yeah,
In
agreed.
conclusion,
Tax base or
Yeah.
tax revenue?
So-
Therefore, as a committee,
Bear with me for a second. I don't think we no longer need this. I thought it was pretty good, but we don't need it
no,
anymore.
this one, not
This?
committee.
Yep.
I think the second, you can get rid of last paragraph too.
Why?
Hold on, careful consultants. Yeah, I don't think there's a problem with that.
I
I
don't
would
think
like
we
to get
should
rid of
have
that.
I would too.
What?
I'd like to get rid of that.
Wait,
In blue.
because
well,
it's their,
yeah.
it's their right to negotiate
They have that
the
right.
host community
Yeah,
agreement.
that's been established,
So-
you're right.
And it's just,
It's-
it doesn't, it's fluff.
It's fluff.
Yeah, it's fluff,
Take it out. Agree?
Yeah.
And I don't
Let's-
even know, again, if we go back to
And do you really need to say that before the special meeting?
Yeah, how do we, it's necessary
Well,
to
we-
express to our fellow citizens that, you know, in the near term, we may see we need additional revenue sources to achieve the collective goals of our community.
Oh, that's good.
So this is what I would write, that you, therefore, as a committee, we felt it necessary to express to our fellow citizens that we strongly believe our town requires additional revenue sources in the near term to achieve the collective goals of our community.
I like that.
To achieve the collective long-term goals?
We can change, yeah, what,
Yeah.
or we can just say, we can take out near or long and just goals, so that we're not giving a timing.
I just spelled something wrong.
Boy, you're losing a girl.
Mavis Bacon would have
She's not
your
looking,
head.
Tim. Don't stop her, she's on a roll.
Mavis Bacon would have your head.
Miss Bacon?
That Mavis Bacon teaches typing.
Yep.
You never did that program?
I-
Oh my God, yeah, it was a
Was I
typing
actually
tutorial?
One regret in my education is I never took typing.
Never took typing.
My dad,
Yeah.
my dad was the newspaper reporter for the Detroit News.
Oh my goodness.
And he would type like
Yeah,
this.
oh my God, yeah,
And it
there's
was
so
on-
many people that type like
That's
that.
so funny.
For the
I don't
carriage
type
form. It was
formally, but
hilarious.
I just,
But he was so
Yeah, I
fast.
touch type,
natural.
yeah. I took it I
He
took
was-
it the summer before college.
He was so
That's
fast
awesome.
though.
Yeah.
Carbon paper now, everything.
Oh my God.
Huh? Where did you live? Yeah, Detroit.
Okay.
alright, let's go through this.
It's been a.
Can I
Can we
read?
put it in a different font?
Not,
Stop it.
Will you stop?
It just
killing me.
hurts me, like I just
I
can't
know
see
it hurts you.
alright, can I read it?
Can't see it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll read it. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Tim Tschirhart. I am speaking on behalf of the town of North Andover Finance Committee as the committee chair. It has been our long-standing practice not to comment on the economic aspects of zoning changes presented at town meeting that are made to facilitate development of commercial property. As the town's finance committee, we are charged with addressing the current and future financial outlook of the town. You think we need to add that?
However, as,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
So, however,
However, comma, as.
okay.
yeah.
However, as the town's finance committee, we're charged with addressing the current and future financial outlook of the town.
Capital T.
I was wondering if it should be. Yeah.
Yep.
And just take out towns earlier up, just say as the finance committee. You don't need it there.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, one
Sorry.
more word going.
Yeah.
North Andover's finances are currently on solid footings as evidenced by our AAA bond rating, reserve fund policies and actual reserves, and prudent fiscal management by our government officials and employees. Currently, the town projects revenue to grow 2.9% on an annualized basis over the next 5 years. This 2.9% growth allows the town to maintain town and school services with incremental improvements. Is that a cap notch, right? Incremental improvements. However, the 2.9% will not allow the town to achieve its strategic goals, including, but not, and that should be paragraph,
Comma, goals, comma, right?
including,
Oh.
no, including, comma,
Yeah. here.
but not limited to, good. 1, reduce classroom size to best practice level stated by our school committee's directives. We rank 19th largest student-teacher ratio out of 406 school districts. Middle school and elementary school renovations, curriculum improvements, addressing our $109 million OPEB liability. These are some of the examples of future costs that we will be challenged to meet with our current commercial and residential tax base. Therefore, as a committee, we felt it necessary to express to our fellow citizens that we strongly believe our town requires additional revenue sources in the near term to achieve the collective goals of our community.
The one caveat is we can fund things with debt, so I don't know if you wanna,
There's a lot
Some
of,
of these. we
some
can
of them,
look at.
so requires additional you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes,
That's
I see.
misleading, the last sentence?
However, the town 2.9% will not allow or may not allow.
Yeah,
Will be it will not be able to be achieved. So if you change that, however, the 2.9% may not allow the town to achieve its strategic goals. Will becomes very
I
definite.
like the word may.
Yeah.
Change it to May?
Yeah.
I like that, I like that
Because
a
again,
lot.
that's a black and white, whereas May is nice and soft.
Yes.
We have
And
it
it-
from the audience, one moment.
The only thing, can you think of one more municipal bullet? Because that looks very school biased.
Yeah, it does.
And
From the school.
I don't want you to,
It does.
I know those are real requirements, but
Fire station. Fire station.
there's Hayes Field,
Okay, yeah, that's true.
Middle,
Hayes
right.
Field, $10 million, you know, there's a bunch of things, so if you had one or two others as examples.
Let's add them in.
Yeah, fire
Let's get
station,
Fire station,
the
Hayes
field.
Field.
Hayes Field, is that the middle school thing?
Yeah, the middle
Yeah.
school.
Fields project,
And one-
yeah.
One
Community
thing,
Fields project.
It's fire station renovation, right? They're not rebuilding it, they're just renovating.
Maybe write it down.
Yeah,
So
and
one-
the
You can knock it
middle
down?
school
They
is-
And we can put some
middle
question
school
marks
is,
also.
Building. It's not renovations.
it could be one or the other, I think,
The
right?
Hayfield.
They haven't done
is
that
that's beyond-
analysis
that's
yet.
beyond the
Building
school.
or
Then we
Yeah,
can
I
put the
think
senior
it's still up
center.
there.
Yeah, sports complex.
Yeah,
Then we
that's
can put the
sports
senior
complex.
center also, right?
No, because the senior center's already been approved and in the it's ready to go. It's not up for discussion anymore.
What about in the last,
Wait a minute, the senior center, that hasn't
Fire
been approved.
renovation and
What do
other
you-
future.
It's already built into the capital
Into the capital
improvement.
improvement, oh, okay,
Fire
yeah,
station?
all right.
You know what I mean, like,
Fire
Well,
all
yeah,
the
it hasn't
school
been
stuff
voted on
hasn't
yet.
been, it's not
Yeah.
even in there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Front end loaders, dump trucks, radios.
No, we don't do that.
Yeah.
But what are we talking about? We have the facility, the capital master plan.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So fire station and other capital,
Is under,
What do you want me to write?
I'm just thinking.
Oh, okay, sorry.
well, you're thinking that however, the 2.9% may not allow the town to achieve its strategic goals, including but not limited to. I think we should discuss adding something over, the
Guys, if it were
town,
me,
like the length of time
I'd remove
that
both
is
of those.
acceptable to the community. So you might be able to do that over a really long period of time. But within a time frame that we find acceptable as a community, we may not be able to achieve that, because there's a distinction.
This is about pace, but I'd also remove 2 and 3, but that's me.
We do reference 5 years here.
Can
Nothing
we
but
just
even-
put in front of the strategic
Yeah.
goals, long-term?
That's fine.
Or
That gives a
longer
little
term,
bit
or longer term,
Longer term,
yeah,
strategic
Okay.
goals.
Is it hyphenated?
yeah.
Yes.
Well, the fire station renovation isn't a longer term strategic goal,
It isn't.
so.
And curriculum
That-
improvements are happening. I just think,
I would take
guys,
those-
Yeah, curriculum
I would take
improvements.
these
They
two-
are longer term because they're just not, oh, well.
they're already on the books, like it's the senior center, it's already baked in.
Well, the middle school isn't.
No, I agree with
School's
you.
not.
Fire station.
Yeah, I don't.
No, the fire station is.
No, it's.
The
No,
2.2
isn't that part of
isn't.
facilities?
It's a placeholder out there
Oh,
way off.
Okay, all right.
I thought that was facilities master
What if we put
plan
a
too.
general
It
budget
was.
and say capital improvements to be determined by the master plan?
There you go.
Yeah,
Two.
Say that, I'm
Oh,
sorry,
oh,
what?
Wait. You're a citizen, you're sitting there.
Yeah, you have no clue.
And if they start talking about master plans.
Yeah,
I mean-
nobody knows what that means.
Well,
I
we
know
can put a
I want,
date.
I know my children, need to have, a smaller class size. And I know we'll probably need a new middle school or a new high school.
We can get rid of curriculum, guys.
Yes.
yeah, curriculum shouldn't,
We
because
just-
Medicaid's helping
So
to
why don't we
fund
just
that.
go with fire
Yeah.
station, OPED, school renovations, we all know, and classroom size. That's pretty fair and equal.
Is fire station appropriate? I just want to confirm that.
I'm
I
looking.
would throw it in.
Yeah,
because
I
we
don't
need
have
to
that
have
with me,
it
if
in.
you could check.
How about the Hayes?
How about we do senior center and fire station renovation, only because it evens out and people don't get fixated on fire station. We're gonna do it.
Senior center's already done, though.
All right.
Yeah.
Senior center's already paid for.
It's
I know,
already paid
that's
for.
the problem.
I
Well-
really don't wanna get into that.
Okay, I don't either.
I just don't wanna get into.
I know.
Can we just,
How about this? Fire station renovation and then other.
And other municipal
Other capital improvement.
municipal capital improvements?
For-
building renovations.
Improvements.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
it could be new
improvements.
buildings,
building, improvements.
Okay.
yeah.
And just, as far as the OPEB business goes.
Yeah.
Other post-employment benefits, do just something like that, mainly health insurance?
I would love to say that, because I don't know what other
I
post-employment,
know,
and I'm on the
that's
committee.
Yeah.
Mainly retiree,
Pensions.
Employee and
Yeah.
retiree health benefits. Can I just write that?
Yeah.
yeah,
Peop-
yeah.
If that was to the county needs.
Yeah.
No, it's only retiree health benefits, not employee health
Yes, it-
benefits. They're
It's
paid
just,
on
it's retiree health.
retiree.
It's retiree health benefits.
Yeah.
Primarily, you can say primarily retiree health.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay. Primarily, I can't spell, I'm so tired.
RIMA.
Yep, I am. Okay.
These are examples of the potential future costs that we will be challenged to meet with our current commercial and residential tax base. I'm glad you remembered, because I don't remember what I just said. These are,
We challenge to meet in a timely manner with our commercial and residential tax base.
Yes.
Is it?
I would,
No?
I take out some of that, so
These
these
are
are the examples of
These
potential.
are examples.
So are some of,
These are.
These are examples.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are examples of potential future costs that we will be challenged to meet in a timely manner with our current commercial and real estate.
Residential.
Do you need
tax
pauses here?
base. Nah,
You don't?
nah,
Okay.
just one sentence.
Instead of we, should we say that our town or our community or our something?
The town.
Yeah. The town should be capitalized probably throughout.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I think
it
so.
should, yeah. It sounds to me.
These are examples of potential future costs that our town will be challenged to meet in a timely manner with our current commercial and residential base. I like that. Therefore, as a committee, do we want to capitalize the
Yes,
city?
committee.
We feel it necessary to express to our fellow citizens that we strongly believe our town requires additional revenue sources in the near term to achieve the collective goals of our community.
Can I just change this to therefore our finance committee, to remind them?
Not our, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your finance committee.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
your
true.
finance
Sorry.
board, Thank you.
Therefore, the finance committee, do we felt or feels? Are we in present tense or past tense throughout this?
You felt it was
Feel
necessary?
necessary.
Mhm.
Feel it necessary.
Mhm.
Feels, it's,
Necessary.
It is,
It
it
is.
is, he can really emphasize.
It
is.
So does this
Do we-
say, if you like the status quo, we can maintain the status quo? If you have bigger aspirations, you
All
gotta
in
think about revenue.
short and sweet.
Pretty
Yeah.
much.
What do you
Pretty
think, Bill?
much. And here's the thing is, we haven't
You
talked
make the
about
decision.
what.
Yeah,
to make the
exactly.
decision, right.
You know, someone wisely said to me, basically, when you're dealing with your boss, you give him the idea of what's gonna be good, and it's your idea, but they make the decision.
Well, that's how women usually manage the.
Yeah, I get that.
go for it, Karen.
You're giving away secret information.
I can't believe you told them that. I'm just kidding.
Hey, you
Publicly.
You're out of the club.
It's okay.
What are you doing?
I'm just double
Same. Oh.
saving it because I'm scared.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
For some reason.
Should we be capitalizing the bullets, and should we making them
Yeah, I'm
dashes
gonna-
instead of numbers?
I'm gonna be doing.
The
I'm
photo-
He'll
gonna
do the cleanup.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do some cleanup on it before I get sent to Mark.
Will you send it to
Yeah.
us too?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
This will be a public document.
Well, I know, but before,
Public
or do we
document.
get to do a like, do we have,
Once I publish it to all you guys,
Do we
it
get to
becomes
see
a
it
collective,
before?
it becomes part of the collective.
Okay, and you're going to attend to getting piles of it on the.
Yep.
On the desk?
Yep.
Next to the.
I thought that was such a
meeting
great
booklets.
idea that it
Okay,
makes
great.
perfect good sense to me.
All right.
Well, okay, and I guess we're not gonna mention anything in this tome about political risks. I mean, I shouldn't use
No.
political risk. The risks of,
Those haven't been quantified for us. We're charged with
no,
looking at numbers.
No, I'm thinking about the Medicaid situation.
No. No,
The
too much.
Medicaid, you mean
oh, I see what you're
curriculum
saying, the
development?
political risk in
What-
Medicaid funding
Yeah.
or the curriculum.
Right,
Oh,
right, whatever
yeah.
Washington decides they're gonna do there.
Yeah,
is,
I mean,
you know,
that's, yeah,
I mean, it can kill us all, shortly,
Yeah.
but.
yeah.
We'll just,
I thought you meant the overall project.
oh, no.
I'm
no,
doing it
no, sorry.
for you.
We've got
No,
those too,
no,
but,
no,
you
no.
know, yeah, those haven't been
Don't worry.
quantified.
Mm-mm.
No, it takes 6 years.
We have no
Is that
idea,
what we do?
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
don't wanna go there.
Okay,
We can
so
close.
our next meeting
Thank you.
will be on January
Don't feel like I did much.
30th at the North Andover High School. It will be, we will start at approximately 6:15, and the special town meeting starts at 7.
We're gonna meet at the high school guidance conference.
The high school guidance conference room, correct.
Thank you very much, because then you'll know where to go. Everyone's been there except, okay.
I think it's right in the middle of this main hallways.
So for those of us
It's
who have
in
been.
those administrative offices ready to come in, though, I think.
So for those, some of us who have been, got some history in the finance committee, this was a godsend suggestion, folks, of getting it done now as opposed to kicking this thing around till midnight.
Right, or having another meeting.
Or having another
Yeah.
meeting. You're absolutely right.
No.
So thank you very much. Do I hear a motion at all?
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.